Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to our May 10th regular council meeting. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We will now have our national anthem from McKay School.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land, to be true love in all of us command. Quand on va se porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Dans l'histoire est une épopée.
Great. Again, thank you to the McKay Choir. This time I'll do our roll call. When I call your name, tell us that you're here. Councillor Clayloff.
Here.
Councillor Beauregard.
Here.
Councillor Bruno.
Here.
Councillor Baggio.
Here.
Councillor Wells.
Here.
Councillor Bodner.
Here.
Councillor Desmarais.
Here.
Councillor Danch. Councillor Danch.
Here.
Thank you. There are no proclamations this evening. We need to adopt the agenda. I'll have Councillors Clayloff and Beauregard move that. Any questions with the agenda? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Any disclosures of interest this evening? None? We have one set of minutes, the regular meeting of council, April the 26th, 2021. I'll have Councillors Bruno and Danch move that. Any questions with regards to the meeting of April the 26th? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. We have the following items being pulled this evening. Items 7.2, 7.3, 7.4, 7.6, 7.9, 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, 8.7, 8.8. Any further items? Seeing none, I'll have Councillors Desmarais and Bodner move the items not required for separate discussion. All those in favor? That's carried. There are no presentations or delegations this evening. We'll get into the mayor's report. It's been almost a month since the province issued a new declaration of emergency and province-wide stay-at-home order. While case numbers have started to drop, we still have a ways to go. Our beaches, marina, and boat ramp remain closed as per provincial orders. Playgrounds, trails, and parks are open for outdoor exercise. At the city, we will continue to serve residents by appointment. In-person appointments will be scheduled for essential and time-sensitive services. Where possible, services will be provided through remote means. To access city services, please call our customer service representatives at 905-835-2900. We emphasize the need for social distancing, hand washing, and face coverings where social distancing can't be maintained, or where required by the provinces and the regions, face covering bylaws apply. Ontario will be lowering the age of COVID-19 vaccine eligibility to 40 on Thursday as it continues to expand its rollout. To register to receive the vaccine, go to the ontario.ca website to book an appointment, or you can call 888-999-6488. I ask that you please be patient and kind when speaking with staff. We will keep you informed of any new information as it's received by the city. This year, Port Colborne residents can have fun in the sun at Nickel and Centennial Cedar Bay beaches for free with a hashtag Participate Pass. Now's your chance to get exclusive access to the beach on both weekdays and weekends just by showing your pass. You can apply online at portcolborne.ca or give our customer service reps a call at 905-835-2900. The City of Port Colborne is seeking resident input on the redevelopment of Lockview Park as part of the implementation of the 2020-2030 Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Located between John Street and Crescent Street, Lockview Park currently consists of a soccer field, open space, and public washrooms. City Council recognizes the opportunity to repurpose the park by adding various amenities, including playground equipment, and have asked staff to create a public engagement plan and a redevelopment strategy for this park. This is a multi-phase, multi-year project. We want to make sure we get it right. The city takes pride in creating beautiful outdoor spaces for residents and guests to enjoy. We want to make sure we engage with the neighborhood to understand what your expectations are. You will ultimately be the primary users of the park, and your opinion is important to us. Residents are encouraged to complete a short online survey, which can be found at www.portcolborne.ca. This asks questions regarding what type of amenities you would like to see at the park, what modes of transportation you use to access the park, and how often you plan to visit the park. City staff will incorporate this feedback in 2 virtual open houses, which will be held. The first one on Wednesday, June the 2nd at 6:30 p.m. And the second one will be Wednesday, August the 11th at 6:30 p.m. And the goal of the virtual open houses is to allow staff to give a brief presentation and participants to ask questions. Individuals interested in joining the virtual open house are asked to email lockviewpark@portcolborne.ca for more information. That's lockviewpark@portcolborne.ca. More information regarding the Lockview Park redevelopment can also be found on our city website. During the month of May, there are several celebrations happening. Nurses Week is May the 10th to 16th. The theme this year is #We Answer the Call, and this was developed by the Canadian Nurses Association to showcase the many roles the nurses play in a patient's healthcare journey. The pandemic brought to light the courage and commitment that nurses work under every day and show the important role that nurses play in our community. And I'll give a shout out to my wife who's working this evening. We wish you well on Nurses Week, Debbie. Fallon Daffa Day is May the 13th. And this year, celebrating the contributions of the Fallon Daffa community, their teachings help people improve their mental, moral, and physical well-being, which contribute to a healthy and harmonious society. May is Fire Safety Month, and the Port Colborne Fire Department traditionally holds an open house, usually a huge open house, and where families can meet our firefighters and look at the trucks. There's all kinds of displays and giveaways. Unfortunately, due to COVID, again this year we won't be running this. However, our fire department will be distributing bags containing fire safety material through our local grocery stores. So we ask that you check out our fire department Facebook to learn when and where the bags will be distributed. May is also Community Living Month. We are fortunate to have a very strong and vibrant community living association right here in Port Colborne that fosters a community where everyone belongs. In support, we will be raising the community flag later this month. Along with hopefully 1 or 2 members of the community living team. That's the end of my report, Council. Are there any questions with regards to the report this evening? Seeing none, at this time we'll have our regional councillor, Councillor Barb Butters. If we want to bring Barb in. Councillor Butters, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor Steele. It's good to be here with all of you. I'm going to be brief tonight, as usual. This week is the Standing Committee's meeting Tuesday and Wednesday, both days. So tomorrow morning is Public Works, and in the afternoon, Public Health. And then Wednesday is Corporate Services and Planning and Economic Development in the afternoon. Today, registered May 10th, there were 75 cases of COVID and new cases of COVID in Niagara. I want to tell you that there has been 202,294 people vaccinated, which represents about 39.5% of Niagara residents with their first dose of vaccination. I want to also highlight that the Niagara Regional Housing is looking for one community representative for the board of directors. So if you are interested, or you know somebody that might be interested, you can go to Niagara's website and look at the application and resume process, and they're taking resumes and applications till May 31st. So if you have an interest, I urge you to act on that. Want to add my thanks to the nurses this week, and as well as long-term care folks doing an amazing job under such difficult conditions. And I'll tell you, we really appreciate the things that they're doing. And shout out to Debbie Steele too. She's awesome. And last but not least, I want to just highlight that there is a new online directory that for connections for Niagara businesses. So I'm gonna actually read you the media release so I don't goof it up. Niagara Economic Development is embracing innovative open source technologies to help Niagara businesses make the supply chain connections they need to succeed. A new online business directory available at www.niagaracanada.com allows Niagara businesses to quickly and easily identify local partner companies that can help them streamline their supply chain, lower costs, and speed up production, all right within Niagara. Businesses can search for connections by sector, municipality, business size, and other variables that allow them to do a targeted search among the hundreds of businesses listed on the site. The site also allows customers to find and connect with businesses in their area, encouraging them to shop local and support Niagara's business community. Businesses are encouraged to browse the new directory and contact Niagara Economic Development if their business is not included or if their information is out of date. The directory was created in collaboration with the region's Planning and Development Services Department and IT Solutions team, and leverages open data made available through the region's annual employment inventory survey. The directory also comes in response to information gathered through 3 business impact surveys undertaken by Niagara's Economic Rapid Response Team. Those surveys showed a need for Niagara to embrace new technology and creative solutions to help weather the economic storm created by COVID-19. In 2020, the Niagara Economic Development also created a COVID-19 PPE directory that connected local businesses with local suppliers of critical supplies, including masks, face shields, sanitizer, and more. So I would hopefully that is some help to our business community, and I hope they will find this. I hope they will find it helpful in their endeavor to get through all of this. And with that, I'm done, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Councillor Butters. Questions to the councillor? Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship, to Councillor Butters and maybe yourself, as you know, we received a question regarding Main Street East from a resident who lives there. He asked, are there any plans to rebuild that street?
Barb, you want to start, or?
Sure. My understanding is it got delayed into next year. I'm not on Public Works, but Mayor Steele is, so he probably has more insight into that decision than I would have. And so I'll leave it in his capable hands to provide some more insight into that.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Butters. Councillor Beauregard, yes, there was a number of projects due to the pandemic that were delayed by a year. This was one of them. And what's going on now is both Councillor Butters and I have been sending in some information with regards to questions we've had from other people in that neighborhood with regards to turning lanes and things like that. So that's been passed along to staff. It will be in next year's budget. So It is a quite extensive project of rebuilding that whole street. They'll be bringing in some safety protocols and things like that. So it's a large project. So that'll start in 2022 and then move forward from there. Councillor Beauregard?
Great, thank you.
Good, thank you. Any other questions to the councillor? Seeing none, Councillor Butters, again, pleasure, thank you. We'll see you this week at committee.
Yes, sir, you will. Have a good meeting, folks.
Good, thank you. Okay, on to staff remarks. Staff, anyone have information for council? Mr. Bowles, you can go first.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, council. And I apologize. I realize my back screen isn't up. I'll fix that for the next time I'm back up. Two updates. One is just an update on the Participate Pass. Interest has been very strong. We're approaching 2,000 applications as of this meeting tonight, and we've been open for a week. We're working through processing those. Our expectation is we'll start mailing them out by the end of the week. Most of the applicants have noted that they do want it to be mailed to them. The customer service team is doing a great job cross-referencing the data. They're doing a couple spot checks on the data, calling a couple people to make sure we have the information correct and all the passes are valid. So kudos to our customer service team answering the calls and helping people register for that pass. The other point of update is I have noted in a previous council that we were trying to get the business plan for the Marina out to council for this meeting. And after talking to a couple people or people across the city in the departments, and I've made mention, I think, to a couple councillors that I think after looking at some of the data for the questionnaire that went out at the end of the voting season, our population size probably needs to be a little larger. Also noting that this is my first time, I think, with the Marina on the file. And I'd like to see the Marina open and operational before I brought the report back to council. So with that, we're looking to delay the business plan for the Marina to the August meeting. In doing so, we'll still be well in advance of the budget process. We'll still be well in advance to be able to set up fee schedules and that for future years. But I think it will give us an opportunity to go back out and get a bigger sample size for people in the population that may want to comment on the Marina. And it will give me a chance to walk the Marina while it's open, as well as potentially, and it would be great if some of the councillors here tonight might be willing to walk the Marina this summer with me as well on that. If there are any questions on those two updates, happy to take them.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bowles. Any questions on those particular pieces of information from staff? Okay, any other staff members with updates for council? Seeing none, I'm going to go to councillors' items. I'm going to start with Councillor Danch.
I'm just going to leave you alone tonight. So sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Danch. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a couple of items tonight. I guess with the nicer weather and people are out and about, there has been a few calls that I've received over drug paraphernalia found along paths and in the parks. People are concerned about how to deal with them, and I've advised them to call the city and to call the police. Someone will come out and pick it up. But apparently that's not been happening. So whether the calls are not actually going in or whether no one's responding to them, I don't know. But we do have an issue with those out there. And with young kids and with animals, our pets on leashes there can easily step on some of those needles. So we do need to have more attention brought to those. And in particular, the senior center over on Field and in that area back in there's a few paths and I guess there's quite a bit there. So something to look at, certainly something to be followed up on. The next item I have is about criminal and suspicious activities happening at night. We have another band of bicycle bandits that are, again, driving around the city with their trailers and that sort of thing, and are now unloading at a place. Actually, it's over on Johnson Street. They're unloading there at about 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and it's happening on a regular basis. I've had quite a few calls about that. I've put in complaints about it, so the people have actually called Crime Stoppers as well. But it's going on, and we need to have more attention brought to it, obviously. That's another one of the items. And the third item is about garbage in around apartment settings. The triplexes and the fourplexes, this sort of thing. There's a lot of people, this happens more toward the end of months where people are moving. A lot of garbage ends up out at the curb and old furniture, that sort of thing. Well, the people are moving don't see fit to call to the region to have that taken care of, and it just sits. The landlords are not following up on it, so it's a real problem. And I'm just wondering if, city workers, I know they're out and about, they see this. Could they maybe make note of it? It would be a lot simpler than myself or Councillor Beauregard or one of the other councillors having to drive their ward every, once a week just to find the garbage spots and call them in, or having irate residents having to call us. It's just simpler. If you're already out there, why not make note of these things? And I do know it's a regional responsibility, but somebody has to call them and get them working on that. So those are my three items: drug paraphernalia, the criminal activities, and the garbage.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm going to have the CAO deal with number 1 and 3.
Sure. Yes, through your worship to Councillor Desmarais and the rest of council, I just quickly, I have had to do this in the past, search for information on syringes, discarded drug paraphernalia. I just did a quick Google search. The region actually has a website dedicated to sharps. I don't expect every resident who comes across a syringe to quickly look at the region's website, but there is, if anyone's watching from the public or if council members are getting these calls, there is a waste info line for public properties such as parks, roads, sidewalks, and so on. I know people don't like to hear this, but private property, it is the owner of the property's responsibility. There isn't a service that comes along to pick up discarded needles that are thrown over your fence into your backyard or so on. But definitely on any public property, parks, roads, trails, and so on, we can call that waste info line at the region or our customer service. Again, and I know council's getting very, they're hearing this a lot and getting good at giving this information out. Our front counter, our phones are all live answered, and you will get a live person. If you get a short recorded message that says, hang on for a live person. So the first voice you hear isn't a live person, but you will get one. And we can put a service order, a service request into a queue and get needles picked up. I would suggest that the same thing applies for garbage at Cruise. And you are correct. We do have drivers out all over the street, building inspectors, bylaw officers, roads, parks, firefighters driving the municipality, and we are trying to make sure that everyone's doing a great job, and there's a lot of balls in the air during COVID. I don't mean to make excuses, but the folks are being kept very, very busy at the city, but that's one more task for them, is to keep their eyes peeled and to look for those types of instances where there's a mattress or a dresser or garbage bags at the curb when it isn't garbage day, and make sure that we get those reported. But if residents or council members see that, in addition to our staff, again, the front counter, 835-29, wait, is that us, 2900? Yeah, 2900, and we'll make sure that it gets logged as a service request. Thanks for bringing it up tonight.
Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. And with regards to your second question, with regards to regional police, I just want to remind everybody, like we did last year, if it's not a 911 call, you can call 905-688-4111 and request to speak to dispatch, or contact Crime Stoppers, as the councillor had mentioned, and that number is 1-800-222-8477, or go to the Niagara Regional Police Services website, and under Report a Crime Online, you can report there. We ask people to keep making sure that they get reports online or phone in, due to the fact that we need our officers to know where the troubled spots are, or if there's something going on in the middle of the night, as Councillor Desmarais is talking about in her ward. And that way, because there are four vehicles that patrol both Port Colborne and Waynflete on a nightly basis, and the fact that they can't be everywhere all the time, it allows them to get to those areas when something may be happening. But even if it's after the fact, to get that information so the police can keep an eye out. I've received a number of calls in the last week that I forwarded to our staff sergeant here, both on behalf of council and some citizens, and they're looking at some areas that have had a few issues. So we stress that, is that you do call that in, and it also allows us to keep track of the areas that are having issues at this time. So I appreciate you bringing that forward, Councillor Demery.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodnar.
I'm good, thank you.
Yes, we know you're good. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have two items. The first item that I'll put out there is a pretty simple one. I've sent out the information to through you to Director Kalamoto and Director Bowles in regards to the chicanes that were installed on the Friendship Trail at Pinecrest Road. The chicanes, the zigzag or wigwags, whichever you want to call them, appear to have been put in place too far apart. So right now, what the cyclists can do is they can just bypass them through the center of them. They're not overlapped, and you can go right straight through the center of them, but that creates a distraction for the cyclist to make sure that he misses the chicane so that he can get out on the road to get hit by the car. So, which doesn't make sense. I've raised this issue. I've shown them some pictures, some dimensions on that, and they can respond to this. So through you to them, if you would.
Yep, Mr. Kalamuto.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the councillor. Yes, sorry I was predisposed. I did get the email, and we will be dispatching staff to go and take a look and adjust as appropriate.
Councillor?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. The other remark that I have is back in March, the amendment to the MAO in the comprehensive zoning bylaw was withdrawn from the agenda. I was wondering through you to the CAO if he could give us an update on when that might be coming back to council.
Mr. Louis?
Through your worship to Councillor Wells, that's an excellent question. As council is aware from past reports, there is a senior staff member in the planning department who's on a leave of absence, taking our number of planning staff from 3 to 2, including the Committee of Adjustment, Secretary, Treasurer. In order to sort of accommodate that decreased level of staff, I have asked actually our City Clerk, Amber, to act as the acting director of that department, and I've brought in some outside help on a temporary basis until the leave of absence has ended. And I've done that in two sort of steps. One is a person who will have some office hours and help with processing planning applications, making sure not to interfere with union work, to stick to sort of the role that was the subject of the leave of absence. The other one is the other action I've taken is to contract the services of a planning firm to take on 3 files, to get them sort of to the 11th hour ready to come back to council. And those 3 files are the one that you've just mentioned, the mineral aggregate operation zoning bylaw wording, the protection of the vulnerable aquifer, and regulations around cannabis operations in Port Colborne. This planning firm, I hope, will have all 3 of them done in the summertime. I don't have an exact date or a council meeting that you can expect them at, but if it's okay with the council member, I'll ask that consultant if they can give a little bit more of a vision of when exactly, and I'll reply to council either by all of council by email or by coming back here at our next meeting on Tuesday the 25th and updating council of an expected timeline at that time. And that's all I have. Just for council's awareness, the in-house planner that we're using for a limited number of office hours per week is Mr. Rick Brady. Rick's been with us for about 2 or 3 weeks. He's a retired planner. He actually was recently the Director of Planning at our neighbor in Fort Erie. He's a member of the Conservation Authority Board, comes with great credentials, and has already been working with staff here to put the processes in place that make sure that there's uninterrupted service during the leave of absence of our other staff member. And all the initial reports are great, that it's working out very well for staff. And if council needs him, they can reach him at his city email address, which is first name dot last name, like everyone else, at portcolborne.ca. So that's Rick, R-I-C-K, dot Brady, B-R-A-D-Y, at portcolborne.ca.
Okay, Councillor Walls?
Thank you, Scott. It's very good to have an update on that so everybody knows it's not forgotten about. And thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Baggy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to give a shout out to Mr. Kalamoto and also to Bala, Mr. Cartwright. Last week I called in some graffiti a resident complained about, and I contacted Mr. Kalamoto because I didn't know actually who owned the property. He forwarded it to bylaw, and within 24 hours of me calling it in, it was taken care of. So thank you very much, Director of Operations and Mr. Cartwright, for taking care of it so fast. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor Baggy. Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Just a few thank yous to fellows in roads. Had a number of issues come up between that, trees and street cleaning and that. I really wanted to thank them. I also wanted to bring up, in answering some constituent questions, I just wanted to pivot off something Councillor Desmarais said, and I'm not so sure she was necessarily referring to some of the litter or garbage that is the large item pickup. But so I'm not sure, Angie, if that was one of the items that has to happen. One of the things I seem to notice, I've said it numerous times, can't our staff go around and pick this up or do that or do something else that isn't a core competency of the city. I think it's the right thing to do to get rid of the problem when we can and not just say it's somebody else's job or some other level of government's job. But I'm wondering if we also aren't, and I don't know if customer service does this. I've started to do it. But I'm wondering if the city could do this if it's the large item pickup. I think we're probably not helping the situation if we just go and pick up that item and drive away. Because there's a potential that the customer didn't know it was the region and there was the pickup line, and some do and some don't. But I think wherever it is another level of government responsibility, I think priority one is get it done, and we do it. I think, though, there should be a note or a follow-up or something at customer service. So, for example, you call about that item. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. That is something the region does, but we're going to take care of it. And call. If you have that issue the next time, right? Like, I'm going to give you a number that will avoid you having to wait by it coming through us. I just think, we need to just not do it, but I think try and help impart knowledge, educate the public so that those same things don't keep happening just for the sheer reason of the citizen doesn't know. So I'm not sure if that's something for Chris or if it's something for Jonathan to enforce with customer service.
I'll give that one to the CIO.
Sure. Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, a couple of things in response to that, and I'm not 100% positive, but I'll defer to Councillor Desmarais if she wants to clarify. I guess I had in my mind's eye sort of a situation where it's the end of the month, an apartment is being vacated, and there's a dresser or a mattress or extra bags of garbage out at the curb. If that's not the case, I apologize. In those cases, though, a call to our front counter will, and whether that call comes from, a building official who's driving by and sees it and knows that he can't get it in the vehicle that he's in, but it is important to get it reported, or whether it's from a neighboring property or from a council member, if it goes to the front counter, it will still be documented in our database as pertaining to that particular property, and then it will be reported to the appropriate level of government, whether that's the Seaway, the city, or the region for that task or that property. So garbage, definitely the region. But it will be tagged to that property, and in the fullness of time, so in some of these situations, the person's gone and they're no longer at that property if it's a rental situation or something like that. But in the fullness of time, we'll be able to see if that's a recurring call out for service to that property address. So if it's 123 Main Street and there's 5 or 6 or 10 instances where a bulky item was left at the curb, but the bulky item service wasn't called in, we can say to the property owner or the tenant, it's your responsibility to go through that process. The other thing I can commit to do is talk to our communication staff and see if there's a time in the future that in between the messages that we're already communicating out on city operations and COVID and so on, that we can work in some messaging around how this garbage service works, who's responsible, what numbers can be called, maybe even talk about the syringe problem that's already been mentioned tonight, and get some public education going out there. So not only is there some engineering on the staff side, there's also some social engineering or some public education around how these services are affected or put into place. Other than that, I'm open to any kind of suggestions from council, or if Councillor Desmarais wants to go further on that issue of this litter.
I'll go to Councillor Desmarais before I go back to Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you back to Scott. Yes, I never did mean for the city to do any of the pickup. I meant for the city to get a hold of the region and have them follow through on the pickup, because it is the region's responsibility. It's not ours. So I feel that we should be reaching out to the appropriate people to get the work done. As far as the type of garbage, most of it would be month-end sort of things from people who are moving. So you have household garbage plus larger pieces. There's that. But in particular, though, there are some areas that have stronger garbage issues than others. And there maybe education will help in that area. But I find for the most part, people are fully educated already. They're just choosing not to do it. So, in that case, I don't think wasting time and educate, I shouldn't say wasting time, but I don't think taking the time to educate them may be the answer there. I just feel that we just need to pass it along to the region and get them to do it. If education is needed, maybe they could do that. Our staff, I think, has a lot to do already, but making a list of some phone calls that have to be made is not as onerous as stopping and picking up garbage. That's all I was talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and I think you're 100% right. Sometimes it's the tenant. A lot of times it is the landlord that shows up at his vacant unit and everything's left there, so they just throw it to the curb. And I think we all know the majority of landlords out there know the rule of thumb on what goes on. But I will talk to Scott about this with regards to communications, because we can have the region partner with us on this. I mean, I know what you're saying, and sometimes it is correct, but every day is a school day, so I don't think a little bit of education will hurt anybody. So let us work with the region on that one, okay? Thank you. Councillor Bruno, back to you.
Yeah, I thought the CEO's explanation was excellent. I learned something from it. I thought it was fulsome, and so I'm happy with that course of action.
Great, thank you. You're all set then, Councillor?
Yes.
Okay, Councillor Beauregard.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you to the Public Works Department Director Kawamoto and Steve Shapowski for just picking up the grass clippings that they did on by Berkeley and Chippewa. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clayliff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple items. First one is a thank you to staff and also the contractor for the sidewalks that are being installed on Clarendon Street. I have to tell you, I've had nothing but compliments regarding the work that's being done. People seem to be very, very pleased. I want to thank the staff for how the rollout happened. People were notified. We didn't have any, I don't know about any other counselors, but I didn't receive any negativity regarding it whatsoever, and they're looking wonderful. So just thank you to everyone who was involved in all of that going on.
Great.
And my set.
Go ahead. Just on that, Counselor, I had a big thumbs up from one of the neighbors today via text message to my phone, so you're right.
Yeah.
Next
I'm
issue?
happy to hear that, because like I said, I was thinking we might hear something, but it's been all good news. Second item is it's another one. I've actually talked with Alex about this. We're going to put out a little safety blurb regarding it, and it's nothing more than, I'm only mentioning it so the more that we talk about it, make people aware of it. I had someone call and speak with me regarding the railway lines again behind Cement Plant Road, behind Clarendon Street, going up towards the quarry and everything. And this is nothing more than, I think because everybody's been in lockdown, and there's been a couple of instances where people have seen, I guess, grandparents out with little children and different ones. And I think people are just forgetting that those rail lines are working lines, and they're putting some little ones, 1 and 2, 3-year-olds, sitting them up on the rail cars and taking pictures of them. And I think that it's just a quick reminder to everybody that number one, it's private property, but number two, those trains are shunting, and it can happen at any time. So just to be aware that it's not a good place for anyone to be playing. Not kids going under the trains, little ones, even if the parents or grandparents are with them. So just a reminder, and that will be going out through Alex. Thank you.
Scott?
Through your worship to Councillor Clayliff, I thank you for bringing that issue up. I've actually been involved in some of the discussion here at City Hall based on the input that you've given and the residents have given to you. It is super important for the public to realize that much like the canal is a working canal and there's all kinds of shipping and potential hazards to a person's safety, it's the same thing with the rail corridor. It's a working railway. The Macy Spur or the Macy Yard between Cement Road and Steele Street is actively shuttling cars, partly during COVID because there's been a little bit less demand for rail. The new Trillium, they're now called GIO, has had more cars going down there. It's sort of a place to store some cars. There's also some construction going to be going on where there's track repairs taking place in Port Colborne, and you'll see a little bit more movement through that area. So it is absolutely a working area that folks, the public, should be staying out of. We have had also some encroachments. People's private amenities have been put on the city property that's alongside the rail, and that is absolutely not supposed to take place. We've had bylaw involved in getting some of that removed, and mostly just informing folks that it's not a no man's land. It is actually property that the city owns, and it has to be remaining clear. And lastly, quads, dirt bikes, any kind of off-road vehicles, they're not to be operated in that area. It's not the appropriate place for that activity. So as the mayor has said, we will be working on communications with, and I'm getting a message from communications here. Oh, yeah, we're doing some work around this and we're looking into it, but rail safety is an important message that the public needs to get, and we'll be actively working with GEO to make sure that the message is out there.
Great, thank you, Mr. Louis. Councillor Clayla?
Thank you, Mr. Louis.
Great. Nothing further from council. We'll get on to the next item, which is consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item number 7.2. So let me bring this up. Is Museum 2020 Annual Report and 2021 Update. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-125 be received for information. I'm going to have Councillors Clayliff and Bodner move that. And we have our leader from there she is, from the museum, Stephanie Powell-Baswick, and will give us an update, and then we'll take questions. Great. Stephanie, welcome.
Thank you to Mayor and Council for having me here at the first council meeting of May, as this is actually May's Museum Month. So the Ontario Museum Association celebrates Museum Month with over 700 heritage sites, galleries, and museums. And we work together this month to share that museums make communities vibrant and vital places to live. So I think through the report that you're about to witness, as well as some of the initiatives that we're working on now, you'll be able to see that that's true. Before I just share the report with you, I'll let your viewers know that this report will be available on the city website, so it can be gone through in detail. I know that council has already had an opportunity to view it, so I'll just be touching on a few things. But you probably remember, if I've been here at other years, I do get very excited about the museum initiatives, the staff, the board, and our volunteers. And this year is no different, although we definitely are not an exception to the pandemic and the effect that it has had on the cultural sector. There's a lot of good news stories here. So this crisis served to be a catalyst for both new program delivery and innovation. And without much further ado, I think I will share the report with you and just highlight a few of the items. So if you can bear with me for a moment while I share my screen. Great. Can everybody see that now?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful. So as you can see, the motto, more than a museum, we serve and we preserve. So our annual report features on the front one of our new ways of celebrating the season of Christmas. And as we were not able to have our grand old Christmas festival, we strung over 1,000 feet of lights and pumped Christmas music onto the ground so that people could come in the evening, get out of their houses and enjoy the scenery. And it was quite popular, shared on social media platforms. And next to that, we can see this was a great way and a good example of how we are connecting to our community. One of the artists that is one of our patrons and our life members did a fundraiser by doing paintings on heritage images from our collection and then selling them off for auction as one of our fundraisers. So that's the Port Colborne Lighthouse that was painted by Doug Todd. And I think it was beautiful. I even bid on it, but I didn't win it. And as we move forward on the annual report, we see the mission, which is to serve and preserve the Port Colborne's residents. So although we have been through different stages of open, closed, and offering our delivery of services in different ways, we certainly have found that with both last year and into this year that we are able to connect and serve with our community. And there you can see one of our staff, Michelle Vosberg on the left, our archivist, is giving a patron their wreath that they picked up. So we did a take your own wreath home, and that was part of our grand old Christmas festival takeout kits. As the letter of the chairman reiterates from me, some of the new ways that we created our services was through a BAS program, Book a Safe service. Our events either went on the road or take home, as well as our exhibits, which we had two great exhibits, A Village by the Canal, which really harkens back to the settlement becoming a village finally 150 years ago. So we're the village of Port Colborne, as well as Judging with Helen Kinnear. Or by the numbers, although the numbers, we've gone from over 19,000 visitors to, you can see 1,367 visitors, as well as the events and community programming. Although those are very low compared to our regular years, one thing that we do have is an increase in our social media, our websites, as well as the artifacts in our collection. So one of the things we found was that people were coming and finding items in their homes, spending a lot of times in their homes, and we were able to benefit from the growth of our collection in that. In terms of our financials, we took advantage of the grants that were available to us. The pandemic gave opportunities for Museums Assistance Program to replace the fees that we would have lost through special events, as well as our admissions. As well, we were able to get a community partner. So Lower Lakes Towing paid for anybody who was able to come in and book a safe service, a tour, and they paid the admission. So we had free tours. We had free exhibit and walking tours, as well as programs. So that was something that was really unique to Port Colborne. I think that as a community museum, it shows the strength that we have with our community and the ties. So we were really pleased to be able to offer that as well. Our special events, you can see, were replaced by grants, and we were still able to receive support from the auxiliary. So that's the Museum Arabella's Tea Room group. We're still able to give our annual donations of $7,000 as they had a healthy savings and were saving for a rainy day. So they were able to step up and assist with our sites. We still had gift shop sales. We instituted the tap service. We definitely went into the new technologies in terms of our programs going online and our speaker series as well. So although one of the revenues that was down was our rent of the archives, as we were no longer able to rent it, we did still make over 1,500, so 1,616 in rentals before we were able to shut down. So we're hoping that we'll be able to recover some of those rental fees in the future. Moving along to our membership, we found that the museum visitors, although we didn't have as many people able to come, we still did a very good percentage of education and outreach for the programming and people that did arrive, including walking tours. We did have some virtual talking and some in-person talking engagements in 2020. And our membership was a healthy 441, including our corporate life and our members. As well, we were still able to have some volunteers join us. So one of the things we're very proud and happy to have are a great team of volunteers. And a lot of them were able to pivot themselves into new ways to help us. So some people are doing research at home. Our gardeners were able to come in and still help with the heritage gardens. And of course, our board of management, they've been meeting virtually every month and coming up with these great initiatives with staff, new ideas. So I do have a list of our staff, both full-time and part-time there, with Michelle Mason, assistant curator at the general store in the Village by the Canal exhibit. We opened that, as well as judging, and I can't commend the staff highly enough. They have been creative, innovative. Their energy hasn't waned. I'm so proud to be working alongside of my colleagues, as well as the board, who have not given up on trying new things. We're feeling very supported by both council and other senior staff in terms of giving it a try, making sure we're doing things safely, but not giving up in terms of offering services to the community. So we're really pleased with that. We had a very healthy contingent in 2020 of summer staff, and that's because the city of Port Colborne was able to work with us with our health and safety plans so that summer students were able to come on site and work with the collection. One of the good things about a museum is we have lots of work to do all the time, lots of things to catalog, finding aids, programming, all those things. And we were able to use Young Canada Works, Canada Summer Jobs, as well as the Summer Experience Program to help staff the museum in the summer. There we've listed our board members who are on a 3-year term, and those are part of the reason that we're so healthy and vibrant are because we have a great board that are active and supportive. Thank you to our council representative here tonight, Eric Beauregard, who's been with us for a while, and bringing forward to our board as well the Heritage Committee. And so we've been working on that and making plans to support furthering the goals of the heritage in Port Colborne in a larger scale, as well as using some of the summer students coming in this year to do that. Some of the highlights that I have listed there, I've already talked about, which are the exhibits. One of the ones I will mention is the permanent exhibit of the Weld Canal, which is now available on the City of Port Colborne website. It's an interactive exhibit. It's great. And we've been having some really good comments on that. And we also had a engaging session with our education programmer, Abby Stansfield, who led the exhibit. And we will be making that available at the end of the year as well during our speaker series. We have another traveling, we have a traveling exhibit that came from the Meisner shipping business, as we're a marine museum. And then there's the Weld Canal one. There's also a War of 1812 and the Sugarloaf Settlement online exhibit that's available through Our Ontario. So you can find a link for that on the website as well. So we haven't slowed down on our exhibits and providing new ways for people to enjoy them. I really liked this quote next to the two exhibits. I'm grateful for the tour being sponsored by Lower Lakes, but I am happy to donate to help you keep your work going. I love the tour, and it was so good to be able to learn about our local history. So that's a theme that we've seen this year as well as last year, is although we've been able to find sponsorships to cover the costs of these operations, we've also been able to feel the generosity of these people who are coming, that although they didn't have to pay admission, they're donating to the museum so that we can further our programming. And we certainly believe that we are connecting with our community because they keep showing us through their actions and their words. Here are a list of all the programs that we did accomplish through 2020. And you're welcome to read them in detail as we go through our events. We took the Arabelle's Pie Social on the road, worked with a business to provide pie, a teacup, and we brought them to our volunteers dressed as Arabella Williams, as well as the connecting to our community through the History from Home project. So that's something that's ongoing. We're circling back with everybody after a year to find out how they're doing after our initial launch of History from Home, where people are telling us how this is affecting them. We had quite a nice broad arrangement of different letters that came in, including agricultural sector, teenagers, people were having their child during the pandemic. So really building the history for future generations. These are all of the services that provided. So although we weren't able to, as I said, do the rental, we were able to do almost every other service that we provide. So within some fashion, people have been able to come do research. We've been able to do research for them. They've been able to come on sites, access all of our services, and come and see the exhibits as well. And we also had a few new things that are coming up this year that we didn't even have in 2020. And I've listed some of those here on our 2021. So if you haven't already joined us through our speaker series online, we'll be having a fall one for that. Right now with Museum Month, we have an I Spy game that is using the collections to connect people with both Facebook and Instagram, the social media, and just a light way to learn, to try to find the item in a collage, but then you get to learn a little bit about the history of that item. And that's been quite popular. The theme this week is Marine theme, which goes along with May 18th, International Museums Day. We're continuing that Marine theme, and we're going to be having a propeller donated and installed on the site from Algoma, and we're looking forward to being celebrating International Museums Day with that event. So as you can see, the really exciting news is if you'd like to be a member of the museum, you don't have to pay this year. It's been sponsored by Bell Marine. So any of you who are out there who are interested in becoming a member, you just have to contact the museum and you're a member. We'll start sending you your newsletter and letting you know about the initiatives that we are having here. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you for having me.
Great, Stephanie. Good presentation. And as you mentioned, the propeller that most of us saw before it was removed on our daily journeys throughout Port Colborne by the old Herb Fraser property, that propeller has been donated to the city of Port Colborne, along with a very large ship's anchor, Great Lakes ship's anchor, that Stephanie and our staff will be putting somewhere in the city. So we do appreciate not only that organization, but others, as you mentioned, Bell Marine, company that I worked for in high school many moons ago. But our community partners are, we can't do a lot of things without community partners, and these people are great, specifically with our museum. So Stephanie, great job by you and your staff. Questions from councillors? I have Councillor Bruno is the only one on my list.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Last year for the quote in there, I was surprised when I saw my name in there, but truly I can't such a quality of report. And to that end, I've been sort of making some calls there because there has to be, whether it's the Museum of Ontario or boards and commissions, but somehow there's got to be a body that recognizes quality of annual reports. And I'm putting your name forward once I find out who recognizes those things, because for a second year in a row, just really well done, very explanatory, very energetic, makes you want to read it and learn a lot. Again, so thank you very much.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Dance.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. Stephanie, going by this morning, I see a little new foundation out front there next to the, so is that where the propeller's going, or?
Through your worship to Councillor Dance, yes, so the pad is already poured and there will be 3 lights. You'll see 3 conduits. Those will be lights similar to the lighting at the Senate half. They'll be LEDs, so long-term lighting. So the idea is that it will be facing King Street in the Marine Park, and it will be lit at nights.
Councillor?
Super, can't wait to see it there. Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Good, thank you, Councillor. Any further questions to museum report? Seeing none, this is to receive. All in favor, please raise your hand. And that's carried. Thank you, Council. Again, Stephanie, thanks. Next item is item 7.3. Community survey results. Recommendation that Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-137 and accompanying presentation be received for information, that the Manager of Strategic Initiatives be directed to bring forward the final draft of the strategic plan as well as the detailed implementation plan for Council's final review and approval at the May 25th, 2021 Council meeting. I have movers Councillor Bruno and Councillor Wells on this. And I'm going to ask for Mr. Long and Mr. Higginbotham. They will give us a presentation. I'll let Mr. Long start.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, Council. We are pleased to present the results from the community survey that was conducted over a 2-week period in April. The purpose of the survey was to obtain resident input on a range of questions to determine community priorities, issues, and concerns, and then to compare and analyze those results with key themes and pillars in our draft strategic plan. This was a collaborative effort between Brad Higginbotham, myself, and Alex Peterson and Cheyenne Stevens from our Corporate Communications Division. So we have a presentation for you, and I'll let Greg take it over. Greg?
Thank you, Gary, and good evening, Council, Your Worship. Thank you for the time to allow me and Gary to walk you through the results of the community survey. You can move to the next slide, please. So at the, as Gary mentioned, at the March 22nd Council meeting, Council directed Mr. Long and staff to survey the community to ensure the draft strategic plan aligns with and reflects the pulse of the community in terms of issues and priorities. So staff took to developing the survey questions by consulting satisfaction surveys conducted in the past by other Ontario municipalities, and the draft of our survey was tested internally by a group of other staff for things like wording, comprehension, formatting, as well as to identify any technical glitches. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. Now, once the survey was ready to be, previous slide. Thank you. Once the survey was ready to be launched, it went live on Monday, April 12th, and closed 12 days later on the 23rd. And the survey was accessible online, and paper copies were made available at City Hall through the public library. Communications assisted us in spreading the word about the survey in the community, and there was a media release issued, and information was posted on the city's website, various places, on social media, and in resident news emails. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. The media release was picked up by Niagara this week, and a quarter-page ad was published in both their print and e-editions. Communications efforts were supported by outreach from city staff to several stakeholder groups like the Downtown EIA and Chamber of Commerce, as well as various boards and committees. Next slide, please. So city staff are encouraged by the participation rate of 4%, 620 completed surveys, which were done by Port Colborne residents over the age of 18. Municipal surveys for a city in Ontario with a population size similar to Port Colborne tends to average around 600 completed surveys. Next slide, please. In section 1, Port Colborne as a place to live, we asked how do you generally feel about Port Colborne as a place to live. We have an average of 6.86 in overall satisfaction, and the highest categories on this 10-point scale are in the 6 to 9 range. Next slide. What would you say are the most appealing things about Port Colborne? So the aspects or the things that Port Colborne respondents to this survey viewed as most appealing in their opinions are ranked here from highest to lowest. So we see the setting in which they live, along the water or the lake or canal, the people who live here, their community spirit, our parks, green and natural spaces, the cleanliness and maintenance or upkeep of the city, as well as the city being family oriented and having a relative lack of traffic were all together viewed as appealing things about Port Colborne. Next slide, please. Not far behind those aspects are other important aspects of what makes Port Colborne an appealing place to live. And we see things like quiet, safe, size, location, really together those are characteristics of the place. And then lifestyle factors like a variety of shopping, dining establishments, recreation, leisure, opportunities, arts and culture, and cost of living. Next slide, please. So this was all one question, and the last slide for this question shows the aspects or things about Port Colborne that are viewed as being the least appealing. Move on to the next question. Next slide, please. And that is the quality of life in Port Colborne over the last 2 years, and whether it's gotten worse, better, or stayed the same. So we'll start with what respondents believe got worse in the last 2 years, and we'll move to the next slide, please. And what got worse, you'll see on the chart on the left, aspects of life in Port Colborne with the highest scores under the worst category. Next slide, please. Many of these same aspects were seen as staying the same over the last 2 years, along with the highest scores in areas like accessibility and transportation and infrastructure maintenance remaining relatively the same. Next slide, please. On the positive side, or what has gotten better, we see the business situation in terms of options of businesses, restaurants, and retail having improved the most. Next slide, please. In the second section, city services, these services are ranked from highest to lowest in terms of importance. And among the top 5, you have infrastructure, parks, trails, transportation, fire and emergency, customer service, and recreation. Next slide, please. So overall service satisfaction, when it comes to city services, we see an average of 6.66. And the highest categories on this 10-point scale are in the 5 to 8 range, and almost 1/5 of respondents rated their satisfaction at 7. Next slide, please. The preferred method of contacting the city to request services or information or to share Next slide, please. And for the importance of offering online or digital services at the city, we see over 55% of respondents are of the opinion that having a wide range of online or digital services is important. Next slide, please. In section 3, and this is our second to last section, vision for Colborne. So we're looking at here areas of priority, and they are ranked from top to bottom in terms of being the most important. And you'll see the area shaded in gray as where they fell in terms of being somewhat important to very important. Next slide, please. So these areas of priority are descending in terms of importance, but they're all areas that are very much important in terms of the way that you see their percentages. They all fall really in the 60 to 70% range, which indicates that they are all of importance. Next slide, please. The only thing that really sort of falls short or below the 50% mark is public transportation, and traffic conditions sits sort of on the 50 to 51 percentile, and that closes off this question about areas of priorities. So we'll move on to the next slide, please. And when asked to use words and phrases to describe the type of community that respondents would want Port Colborne to be in the future, we took all of the words and phrases that they used, we aggregated them, and tried to categorize them under the following headings. And some of these words could easily go under one or more category headings, but for the purposes of this presentation, we simplified the format and assigned them to one category only. And the next slide has another set of headings, which you see a little bit of overlap. You see community coming up twice. Here we see recreation governance. And then the other categories is really a set of words or phrases that can go under a number of different headings or categories. Next slide, please. So finally, to close this section off, respondents have a chance to assign importance to 7 specific goals. And these goals are ranked, the ones that you see here are ranked among the highest because they've exceeded the 70% threshold. Next slide, please. Just below though the 70% threshold, but still ranking very high in terms of importance and along the lines of neutrality are these 3 goals. Next slide, please. So I would guess that you're very curious as to who took the survey. So in the final section of the survey, we asked some standard demographic questions, and this will go through very quickly. When it comes to age, over 63% of respondents were in the 25 to 44 age category. Next slide. In terms of gender, we see strong distribution between both male and female categories with just a slight 6% difference variance between the 2 of them. Next slide. Occupation came in the highest in categories of being self-employed or employed, as well as caregivers. Next slide. Education. There's pretty good distribution across popular education groups. So we found that those who answered the survey were educated. And the final slide is income, and around 50% distribution is among personal income earners, around 20 to 39,000 and 40 to 59,000 a year. So that gives you a sense of income. So we'll move on to our analysis. Next slide, please. Thank you. To remind you of the purpose of the survey was to obtain resident input on community issues and priorities, which could be used to inform and finalize the strategic plan. So after staff examined how all the questions were answered, we expanded the analysis process by looking for consistencies or patterns in the importance given to issues and priorities. We then took those uncovered patterns and consistencies and we carefully and thoroughly studied them in relation to the contents of the draft strategic plan, particularly the pillars and the action items identified in the plan. Next slide, please. So some of the observations we gathered from our analyses are that it was good that we took the opportunity to not allow people to see the draft strategic plan before taking the survey, that way to eliminate a form of influence or bias that people may have had by seeing the draft strategic plan before taking the survey. And section 2 on city services revealed that there is importance in delivering quality and innovative services that demonstrate excellence in meeting the community's needs. Next slide, please. The vision and goals in the draft strategic plan align well with the community's vision and goals for Port Colborne, and the issues identified by respondents as important have links to and are covered by the draft strategic plan in a number of different key areas, such as arts and culture, parks and recreation, economic development and tourism, and land use planning. Next slide, please. So these issues and priorities are taken up and reflected well in the strategic plan's projects, initiatives, and action items. And finally, the concept of sustainability and its 3 pillars of social, economic, and environmental tie in well to the plan, and the plan does support this concept of sustainability, and it helps to capture the community's needs and values, and ultimately helps capture what the respondents of this survey saw as their vision for Port Colborne moving forward. Next slide, please. And to close off this presentation, a section summarizing the survey results will be added to the final draft of the strategic plan. A full report of the survey results will be added to the city's website and shared with staff. And residents who provided their email addresses when filling out the survey have been entered into a draw for one of 6 $50 gift certificates to a Port Colborne business of their choice. Next slide, and our last slide is that staff would like to thank residents who participated in the survey and helped us share their feedback and put that feedback together into this presentation this evening. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Greg and Gary. Before I go to questions, council, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We're having a bit of a technical issue at our end here. So it is now 7:52, so we'll be back hopefully by 7:57. You'll stay on Zoom, but we'll be cutting off the call.
2, 1.
Great, thanks. Welcome back, everybody. We think we've got everything fixed, we hope. All our counselors are here. Okay, so I've got, for questions, I have Counselor Bruno to start.
Thank you, Worship. This is like Christmas morning for me when I see data and surveys, and I think probably for Eric Beauregard too, who's has done a lot of that in a previous life. First off, thank you to all staff that was involved. And the big kudo to you is really that not only is it transparent, but it's glaringly open. And I would just say that cities that don't do this are often afraid of the answers. And I think it's important that we show all the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this report, although geared to strategic plan, is kind of a hybrid in a municipal world, because it's also a reflection on service and how people feel about the community. Even though you'll note in the comment section, and I'll quote it, the priorities, this is based on, the survey is based on the priorities that matter most to the community, reflect the numerous projects, initiatives, and action items included in the draft strategic plan. And it does do all that. And that's what its core function was. But it also peels back a whole bunch of other things, predominantly service, what people value in the community. And to that end, and I would just ask maybe if Scott could, or Gary or Greg could comment on this at the end, is that this is an opportunity to not only measure ourselves against previous, against the strategic plan and how we move along with it, but it's the opportunity, and although you're not supposed to do this, you could do a piggyback service incorporating strategic planning measurement against this year. In other words, how well did you improve or not improve against this baseline? But we could also use this as something that's a metric for us as a council and for staff to measure itself against how the community feels we're doing in various aspects. So I'd like maybe later on to look at both from Greg and Gary's point of view on how they see this evolving and if they would be doing this again next year, and to the CAO really how we could incorporate this with a broader reach, with perhaps some more detail on city services and quality of service, because I think it's a great opportunity going forward. Just a comment on the methodology. I think that one of the things that raised above the line for me was the 617 online surveys in 3 hard copies. And if you cross-reference that with the demographics of the community, those over 65 and that, you'll see that some of this is about ease of response. And so, you know, older segments of the population have been proven, and that's why, you know, you get paper copy and online can service different segments of the population. Same with education-wise and income-wise. So I'm wondering if we were to do this again, and it would probably improve the numbers and a more accurate cross-section of the population demographic in Port Colborne, if perhaps it's done in combination with a tax bill or water bill, which again, that has its faults because it also doesn't include many people. But I think the more avenues of reach, the better the quality of the outcome. So, yeah, really pleased on that. Just some of the slides that really intrigued me, and I'm hoping did council and staff. And this is more not from the strat plan point of view, but customer service and how we react as a municipality. I find the results in some of the slides very much mirror, but I'll say this with a grain of salt, the public and council's priorities, or the feedback they get is probably a better word, versus the operations of the city. So for example, I find it interesting that, you know, if you look at the most appealing things, you know, we can't change lakeside and waterfront setting. And well, we can encourage to make people more friendly and have community spirit. It's interesting to me that number 3 and 4 are parks, natural and green spaces, clean and well maintained. And so if I look at the last year or two on councilors' items or budgetary items, you know, you get the passion of Angie talking about, you know, dilapidated houses and bylaws and that kind of passion. And you've got Mark talking about the garbage on West Street, myself talking about signs. The mayor's introductory walk through City Hall is about, you know, what the condition was out front between litter and everything else. And it seems to me that there's, and I'm leaving out other councilors because I don't want to go through all 9 of you, but it just seems that those are the kind of things we ought to remember because they touch the people at budget time. So when we had the issue of, you know, either laying off students, right, or contracting out, you know, lawn cutting versus doing it in-house, the reason for all those things, to me, seems to be pretty apparent in that that's exactly what the public's thinking. And so I guess I just want to put a bug in the ear of staff that it's those kind of things, at least for this councilor, and I can't help but believe what we hear here every second Monday is those kind of things, the condition of the street, the condition of the park, the litter, the grass growing, the signs on poles, the bent signs, the this, that, and everything else, that this survey, you know, points like in a very blunt way that that's the thing that people are the most concerned about, but also the most proud of. And so I just hope we keep that in mind with everything we're doing in terms of priorities going forward. And just to sort of sum up on those slides, it's interesting to me that, you know, when it comes to Port Colborne as a place to live, on the stay the same, we're happy with it. Parks, recs, maintenance, 3rd and 4th. When it comes to better, parks and recreation, 2nd highest. When it comes to city services, importance of city services, parks, trails, active transportation, 2nd highest. Like there's a pretty big message that's bleeding in here, and while it may be taxes and it may be other things, it's about what touches people. And you know, I just thought of going through this quickly because I think that there, I wouldn't say there's a disconnect, but I think we need to move more towards, you know, we're always talked about being this great place to live, and part of that is clean, green, friendly, all those things that I think are, and if you look at the strat plan and what it's pointing to in terms of vision statement, strap line, all that kind of thing. So Greg, Gary, Scott, I just wanted to thank you for this. I hope we will build on this and do this annually, and that we will do it with a community survey and a community survey that's related also to the strat plan. But I think going forward, I know our corporate service director is a big data person, and we're going to gather data on the beaches. So I'd like to certainly see that this stays a high priority. And again, thanks. Don't know if Gary, Greg, or Scott wanted to comment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I'm going to go to the CAO first.
Yeah, through your worship, I'll take a chance to respond to the councillor's comments through you to Councillor Bruno. I appreciate the commentary. As well noted, I'll try to be brief, which is not something I'm known for, but in reverse order. The second part of what you talked about, I think it does hit home for staff. I think it also sort of needs to hit home for council. I mean, as in, I guess you could extrapolate the results to sort of say, if these are the priorities of the community members, maybe they're the financial priorities of the city and the budget priorities of council. We do know our parks guys and girls are under a great amount of pressure. They do their best to keep acres and acres and acres of parks and waterfront, canal front, clean, green, ready to use for everyone. And sometimes, at the end of a 40 or 45 or 50 hour work week doing that, and when you get the complaint about one garbage can overflowing or, one fallen tree branch, it's demoralizing because you've worked so hard to achieve that level of service that the community expects and that council expects. But it's like there's one more complaint. And I did actually, while the video was being fixed here, I sort of whispered to the mayor, half in jest, but not totally. Today at council, when the councilor's remarks came up, they weren't, there's a problem here, there's a problem there, there's a problem everywhere. Today the remarks were, great job by Public Works, great jobs by Parks, great jobs by this department. So we're getting more kudos and less critiques, if that's a way of putting it. So that's a good thing. I think we're on the right track with staff. To answer the first thing really quickly and to answer it for Greg and Gary, I think this is a great exercise that they've undertaken and an even better report that they've presented to crystallize the data. I can't take any of the credit at all. This is all their work and it's fantastic. But as the presentation was going on, the wheels are turning in my mind and I'm thinking, we've got to do this every year or 18 months or 2 years. And this is how we're going to measure the strategic plan in some ways. So as council knows, we do an employee engagement survey. That's how we take the temperature of the workforce. That's how we measure culture, morale, pride, communication, accountability, so many things that we have as a workplace. We need to do that in the community too. The other thing we need to do, and here's the challenge for staff, the challenge that Councillor Bruno is issuing to staff, is how well are we sharing our story? Because this is also an opportunity for staff to tell the community what's been taking place in City Hall, what's been taking place in the Public Works building and the fire hall and the library, and what's taking place out on the street. Because you have, I'll tell you, one of the things that was, for example, got good results for staying the same was transportation and transit. I know we've enhanced transit in the last 2 years. We've added hours at the start of the day and we've added hours at the end of the day, but it doesn't seem like that registered in the survey results. So maybe, even though we've improved it, we haven't got the word out in the community. So that's our challenge until the next time we perform the survey again, is to make sure that we share our successes and we communicate them outwards and that the folks around here know. But there's no better way. So Gary and Greg, get ready. You're going to have to keep this up because this is how we're going to measure the success that we have as a municipality.
Thank you, Scott. And I'll go to Greg and Gary. Anything to add?
Through you, Your Worship, to Council, we appreciate Council's comments and Councillor Bruno's recommendations on incorporating more surveys in the future, and I'm very supportive of what CAO Louis has just said in terms of the challenge for staff. Mr. Mayor, I don't have anything further to add. It's been a great project, and we'll incorporate this into the final strategic plan. I'm not sure if my colleague Greg has any comments.
Greg, anything to add?
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno and council, no, I have nothing further to add other than thank you for allowing us to walk you through the results, and it was a good exercise in being able to check the pulse of the community and get their perspective on all these issues and priorities.
Great, thank you. Councillor Beauregard up next.
Through your worship to Greg and Gary, I just want to say that this was an excellent presentation. The data, the visualization of the data and how it's displayed, it was a standard that I saw when I worked at Ipsos. They're a big market research firm. It's I would say this is very well done and should be the standard of all our presentations that show data. Hopefully, maybe even with the presentation that was done by Mr. Hack regarding the beach access. But anyways, one thing I do want to bring up is the demographics. Councillor Bruno did touch on that. In particular, if you look at the demographics slide, the percentage of respondents that were between the age of 25 and 34 made up 34% of the survey. So clearly it was weighted, well, then you got the 35s and 44-year-olds making 29.52%. So it was heavily weighted disproportionately towards the younger, I would say, side. Especially given that our population in the city of Colborne would be, I believe, older. So I'm just wondering, was there more weight at all given, like, to some of the older populations to kind of make up for that?
Greg?
For your worship to Councillor Beauregard, we found that in asking this question that yes, there was the fact of the matter that most of the surveys came in, and that's 617 were completed digitally or online, goes to line up with that demographic that you're seeing there. So further to what Councillor Bruno said, in the future we would be looking to allow this survey to stay open longer than 12 days, which would allow us to open up different distribution methods, whether that's print, whether that is even a telephone survey as well, to reach other demographic groups and not that 25 to 44 that you see heavily weighted in the results of this survey.
Sorry, so through your worship, I understand, yeah, we can try to reach those demographics by hopefully getting them to actually answer the questions. But what I was kind of heading towards was more of those that did answer. Usually you can manipulate the data in some ways to give them a little bit more weight on their answers. So I was just wondering, within certain fine lines, right, without making it skewed completely and improper. So I was just wondering if we did that at all.
Through your worship to Councillor Beauregard, at this level of analysis, no, we didn't take it to that level. Although had we wanted to extrapolate more information from the data set, we would have, but we didn't feel as though at this point in time that we needed to take the data set and do exactly what it is you described.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demery next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. First of all, I would like to thank staff for going forward with this. This was excellent. And all of what Councillor Bruno has said, I would agree with 100%. Without a doubt, this was a really positive exercise. And I do believe that it should be continued going forward. I have to say, I think that much of these replies were, as far as the absence of older generation replies, might have been a COVID effect more than even the lack of technology. A lot of people didn't have access to the technology, and a lot of people through COVID have changed their behaviors and you know how they're doing things. So you know that I think that effect was certainly in there as well. I think over time things will change, but if we extend the way that we reach out to the public in the future, and hopefully COVID is a thing of the past by then, I think you're going to see much fuller results. They're going to be great. I did have about 3 people who reached out to me and said they were really, really happy to see this, because for the very first time they've seen a city hall open to the public. That's how they put it. They felt that finally they were being invited to tell people, to tell us what they wanted. And I went into an explanation that that's what your vote is for. But it, in any case, I certainly wanted to do that with them. But they were really clear that they felt this was the way that they could actually express themselves. So I would encourage that all the way down the line. I think that's very important. And one person said, we were looking at the results together. When I got my package on Thursday, we were online looking at the results together. And she said, well, it's kind of interesting how the people, she lives in Weld, and she goes, people in Port Colborne seem to really love where they live and where they play. They just don't want to work there. So I thought that was kind of interesting too, because it does read that way in a sense. So it was a good effort. I think we should continue it, and kudos to everyone involved. It was just a really good thing to do. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Louis.
Yeah, just through your worship to Councillor Demery, I think that's some of the points you made at the beginning of your comments. Our staff are going to take to heart. We do think it was a COVID factor, some of the responses. We think we can only go up from here in number. We did a lot of campaigning around promoting that the survey did exist, but of course we're not on the Kardashian level of communication in terms of people receiving our message. So, and that is, and I know the strategic plan, which is coming forward again at next meeting, is kind of a hazy, nebulous concept to the public because they haven't seen it in its final form yet, and they will after it's adopted by council. But I go all the way back to 2019, being at Roselawn, having work sessions, workshop type sessions, where it was talked about and council members talked about improving city communication outwards, but also improving city communication inwards. So that's how the public gets a hold of the city, whether that's City Hall, whether that's City Council, whether that's one staff person at the city. And that's how I think we're going to do a better job of making sure that we can get that number of responses higher and higher and higher each time we conduct the survey. So it can only go up from here.
Great, thank you. All set, Councillor? Okay, I have Councillor Baggett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Just also kudos for the survey. When Councillor Beauregard doesn't ask what your margin of error is on your survey, you know you've done really well. So my one question is, Councillor Demery mentioned it a little bit. You like to live here, play here, but you don't want to work. You don't work here. And the survey didn't really didn't ask people, do you work in Port Colborne? And that I am very interested in hearing. If we talk about attracting industry or whatever, maybe it's high. Maybe these people all have jobs already, and it's not an issue for them because the 30-year-olds or 39-year-olds should have jobs, and probably more into the higher tech or auto industry. So just something to think about for our next thing is something about people working in attracting industry to Port Colborne, some sort. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you. Well, maybe they just work out of town. They don't want to live anywhere but Port Colborne. Think of it that way. Put it in a positive spin. They don't want to live to the north of us, I guess, or to the east or west. So anyways, that's it for council. Oh, sorry, Councillor Bruno. I thought your hand was still up from before. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you. Through you to the CAO. Scott, I'm hoping that and Chris, not at the detriment to other departments, but an extra maybe kudo, if you could, to the folks at Parks, Recs, and all those that do maintenance around the city. This is part of their success that they were so highly regarded in the survey. So if you could hand that off. I certainly am glad, the CAO, that you finished a big part of what I should have said, and that is, on the second half of things, it's really all about communication, because some of the things we've either improved of or that we don't do very well, maybe just because we're not telling the story, may not, but if you get that out and then you still get a thumbs down, then you know it's what you did, not that people didn't know. And finally, I'm just going to ask through you to Greg. Greg, you mentioned that people could tick the box about whether they want to get the results or the email of the survey. Two things. One of the things I got asked was, and maybe you could speak it now or put it sort of up front on any future survey. I had a couple interesting comments where people wanted to, for whatever reason, they wanted to fill out the survey, but they wanted to know that there was anonymity and that, you know, their comments couldn't be, you know, picked off geographically by address or by name. So I'm wondering if you could address that. And the other side of this, I've been talking with Alex and we got the new website, and because you mentioned capturing people's emails and names, I was wondering if they will either automatically, and maybe not because they weren't asked permission, but can they go into our database about getting city information? Because whilst they very much were concerned about wanting to know about this survey, it would tend to lead me to believe they want to know about lots of things, Port Colborne. And so I'm wondering if their names and emails will be included in our database for marketing, City Hall, newsletter, agenda package, all the things that are tick boxes on our website, and I'm told going to get a higher profile on the homepage. Thank you.
Through your worship to Councillor Bruno, to answer your first question about anonymity is all we have collected from the survey respondents is their email address, and that in my opinion is not enough to tie it back to any identifiable individual. I mean, unless we exchange numerous emails with those people, maybe then we might be able to find out who they are. But the only thing that ties the person responding to the survey to some sort of identifiable information is their email and potentially their IP address, which is collected by the survey provider. Outside of that, we have really no way of knowing who these people are. And to answer your and we would like to keep it that way, I think, in order to allow people to answer honestly and openly about these issues and priorities. And to answer your second question about communications, so I personally sent out an email confirmation to everyone who provided an email address when answering the survey. We told them that they were entered into the draw, but due to CASL, which is the anti-spam legislation here in Canada, we can't automatically take those emails and put them into our email marketing database. What I did provide some small text at the bottom of the email that went out to every respondent, telling them that this was a one-time email and that they were not signed up to the city's email newsletter list. That is something that they have to provide consent to, and we've encouraged them to do that, but I cannot personally sign them up to a list or provide that list of information of email addresses to communications to sign them up unless consent is given.
Councillor?
That's great. I appreciate the anonymity question. It is important that they can remain anonymous. Just on that point, maybe for future surveys, if there is at the end an option, if they want to participate in our various other databases that we have out there, so that we get the permissive handshake and then they can become part of those databases. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, the question has, or the report's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council, and thank you, staff. Item 7.4, the Planning and Development Department Report 2021-136 be received, that the official plan amendment attached as Appendix A to Planning and Development Report 2021-136 be approved, that the zoning bylaw amendment attached as Appendix B to Planning and Development Report 2021-136 be approved, and that planning staff be directed to circulate the notice of adoption and passing in accordance with the Planning Act. I have Councillors Wells and Kalaloff moving that. Mr. Schultz is on the line today. Where's David? Oh, there he is. David's here, and Mr. Fontaine's here, who is the landowner. David, is there anything to add before we go to questions for council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Nothing really to add other than just wanted to make it clear that the memo that we received, the memo that was submitted is the revised recommendation for council's consideration, and the bylaw attached to the council agenda reflects that recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll go to questions. I'm going to start off with Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't know so much I have questions, but I do have some comments. The first comment I'd like to make is in regards to the weight that's put on this proposal by the comments that were presented by the region. I have had some if you will, or some basically disagreements in regards to the intentions or the intent of that letter, and from that perspective, maybe I can direct these through to you, David, for example. In the region's report, on page 4 of their letter, they recommend limiting the permitted uses to a Class 1 industry and ensuring that the 20 meter minimum separation distance is achieved. I didn't see in their report or in their letter anywhere that they included that 9 meter strip of property that's owned by the city that currently is zoned residential development. So this separation distance that they've actually implied is actually the 20 meters from the west side of that strip to the buildings that are proposed. This is one of the areas where I think you and I have had a disagreement, David. Can you show me where or identify where in their response to us, or their comments to us, where they have included the 9 meter strip?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, that actually came as a discussion after those comments were submitted. I had a lengthy discussion with the planner at the region, as she was not aware of that strip of land in between that is held by the city for drainage purposes. So we had a discussion about whether that could be used as part of the required 20 meter setback as per the D6 guidelines, and she did not have any issue with that. From the city, we do delegate a lot of our authority to the region for review of provincial and regional documents, of course. So we do rely a lot on their expertise and guidance for those types of restrictions.
And following from that, they also state that in order to consider a reduction in a minimum separation distance, that an impact assessment has to be done. Was that done?
To my knowledge, no. But the reduction, there is no reduction to the 20 meter setback because the 15 meter on-site setback, which is required under the zoning, plus the 9 meter setback achieves a 24 meter setback, which is in excess of 4 meters to the ministry standard.
Councillor?
Again, I would, again, this is where I have that disagreement with you, David, but I'll leave that for a position of I agree to disagree with you, okay? Leading on from that there, I just think it's important also to state that the region does not classify, and the Ministry of the Environment do not classify industry as we've classified it in our zoning bylaw, and they refer to classes 1, 2, and 3. And the region was specific with regards to class 1 industrial activities. And class 1 industrial activities, although we've attempted to identify some specific ones, those specific ones could also meet the criterion for class 1 industries and be included. So in this talking with Mr. Fontaine, it's my understanding that his main thrust is a transportation depot. That's his business. That's what they do there. So, and I think that it can be done within the criterion for Class 1. So in an effort not to be so specific, to exclude possible industries that could qualify as a Class 1 industry, would it not be better just to utilize the criterion that's already established to designate what is not prohibited and what is prohibited?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, if council chooses to do so, they can make that change in the bylaw. And if it's the will of council, then that can be done. We did have discussions with the region, and those were the recommendations that they put forward. And not that we have to follow it as a city, but we do rely heavily on their expertise from the ministry side of it.
Thank you, Councillor Wells.
All right, continuing on, it's my understanding, based upon the drawing that Mr. Fontaine provided, and also with some discussions with Mr. Fontaine, that he has no intentions of utilizing the area between the building and the east, on the east side of it, and the property line, and that whole area basically could be turned into a landscape buffer, if you will. Would that be able to be put into the site plan agreement, that section of property only be used for landscaping, and not be utilized for any type of activity on the property? Because even though that region has stated that parking would be in a paved parking lot, if they put up, or a paved road or a parking lot on that area of the building, that does not eliminate the or mitigate any of the impacts of noise, light, odor, because I know the neighbors would not like to be woken up by a backup beeper on one of Mr. Fontaine's truck at about 3 o'clock in the morning if he was coming in. So I was wondering if that could be done.
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells, that can be something that staff can look at through the site plan approval process. We can ensure that that area stays as landscaped area and isn't paved for a parking area. That would eliminate any further expansion of a parking area or any other use that would be in that area if it's just designated as a landscaped area.
Councillor?
Okay. Almost finished. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to David again. The Appendix A, the drawing of the subject lands, when I look at that and I know what the area looks like, it really doesn't reflect accurately that area. For example, it shows Janet Street as dead ending, when in reality it continues on past Lakeshore. It shows that Canal Clalley is actually connected to Canal Bank Road, which it isn't. And it also shows that the intersection of Welland, Clalley, and Canal Bank has an island in it, and Welland Street's not connected to Clalley Street, so that really needs to be cleaned up going forward, unless that's what the future holds for it. Is that what the future holds for that, or should that be cleaned up, I guess?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Wells. Unfortunately, that's the best parcel fabric mapping that we have at our disposal. Even if you go on Niagara Navigator, that's what will be shown on there, at least to my knowledge. Our GIS system for creating those schedules is not exactly up to date. I know our GIS division is working on updating that so we can have all of that stuff that's cleaned up in the future. But for this matter, the parcels indicated on the plan are the ones that are being proposed for the changes, even though the area may not reflect that through aerial imagery. But that is how the parcel fabric is in that area.
Councillor?
I didn't think that was an aerial image. My understanding, that looked like it came off of a drawing, straight up drawing, rather than an aerial image off the zoning bylaw Schedule A. But I would recommend that be cleared up and accurately reflect the area that's there, so we don't have any misunderstandings or misrepresentations coming forward in the future. The one last thing is I really do agree with sharing or circulating the preliminary site plan with the public for them to comment on. So the last thing I would say is that we need to include all of Class 1 industries, and we need not to have any parking or any activities on the east side of that building. And then maybe we can get some buy-in from the residents in regards to going forward on this, and knowing that we're looking after them so that it won't impact them. One other last question or comment I wanted to make was that if we are going to consider selling that land, that consideration should also follow the policies for land disposal that we have for the city, and in that it would be of equal offering to the other parties abutting that property on the east side. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I have Councillor Claylough.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Schultz. David, can I just ask you quickly? You said that the region was all right, had no difficulty with that 9 meters being joined with the 15 meters to come up with that 24 meters, right? Did you have any comment from our own staff regarding that 9 meter space? Are they in agreement that it should be, or it could be sold off or be a part of that peak parcel? Has our staff made any comment regarding it?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Clayliff, I haven't had any discussions with Mr. Fontaine about the proposal or any future plans with that strip of land. It's still in the city's ownership, and that wouldn't necessarily be the planning department that would be involved in that anymore. I believe that would go through economic development for land sales. Perhaps CAO Louis could comment on that further. But to my knowledge, I don't have any future plans or knowledge of what would be happening with that.
Okay. Do you have any, Mr. Louis?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Clayliff, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's 2 separate discussions about land and ownership. And I think the 9 meter strip you're referring to is city-owned land between the homes to the east and the subject lands to the west. And when Councillor Wells refers to it, he's referring to its inclusion in a calculation for the D6 guidelines. He's not referring to it changing hands in any sort of a transaction. The other lands to the north and, well, to the north and on the road on Welland Street there, I think that there's a reference from the applicant to purchase those lands from the city, and that hasn't been entertained at all. And I think that's where Councillor Wells has made reference to the notion that it should be processed in accordance with the city's land disposal policy, which means more purchasers could step forward and be engaged in that process rather than a direct sale to the abutting landowner. So I just want to go back to the 9 meters. The 9 meters is being included in a distance calculation, the same as the minimum distance separation is calculated on livestock operations. When a severance is being considered, it has to be so far in radius. The property ownership doesn't come into question. It's just a line of sight distance. And I think that's where Mr. Wells, Councillor Wells, and David were discussing the 9 meters. And I don't think there's a role for, so that's planning interpretation on the D6 guidelines. It's not a potential sale, and it's not really an engineering concern, in my opinion, unless David thinks otherwise. If we do get to processing the other parcel, that was, I think, like I said, I think there's a reference in Mr. Fontaine's letter about that. That would be handled through Gary Long, the manager of strategic initiatives. We've recently moved land sales from the planning department, where they were sort of maybe not the best place that it was suited for, over towards the to the strategic initiatives departments. And I want to talk just for one more second about land sales. That's everything from a building lot or an industrial parcel in the industrial park, for example, Stonebridge or Invertos, all the way to a single property owner needs a foot of land to square up their property. Sometimes it's just a boundary adjustment, and it's not a sale that would entertain other offers. It's more specific to one property, and those are governed by the same policy, which is the city's land disposal policy, and that's in the Strategic Initiatives Division.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. Councillor Glale.
Thank you, Mr. Louie. I just have one more comment or question. I believe at the last council meeting, we talked about a report that had been compiled regarding that Port Colborne owned land, city owned land, and the contamination. Has there been anything done with that, or has staff been able to put together a report regarding the contamination that's on that property?
Mr. Louie. Sure, through your worship, Councillor Kalalev, I unfortunately have allowed our public works staff to sign off the meeting because they didn't have any more reports today. But I can tell you that the city is in a separate process that's unrelated to the zoning of the subject property here. And just as a function of our ownership of that property, we are doing some environmental studies. There are two type assessments. One's called the phase 1 and the other is called the phase 2. Phase 2 being more in-depth. We have done one of those. We have done the phase 1. We have a company contracted to do a phase 2, and that report generally will reveal to us as the owner if there's some required remedial action to, if the property needs to be made safe, if it is in fact unsafe, which we can't presuppose that it is. So I can bring back further reports to council once that study is done by the consulting company that does it.
Councillor?
Thank you.
Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I do have a few questions and a few comments to make. First, though, I did receive a letter from Melissa Bigford late this afternoon, and I'm not seeing it here in the package. I'm wondering if all the councillors received that. Did? Okay, good. I just want to make sure of that. All right, so that's the first thing off the top. I really do have some concerns with the heights of the buildings, and I'm wondering, has anybody taken a look at the impact of sunlight in the backyards of the houses along Janet Street, depending on the height of the building? You know, we're talking about a building that if we go through with the 14.5 meters, that's what, 47.5 feet, that's 4.5 stories. That's taller than City Hall. If we look at the 11 meters, which is what the policy recommends, that's still 36 feet, 3 1/3 stories. That's probably about the same as City Hall. That's a pretty massive structure to have in your backyard. I just wonder, in the number of meters between the property lines of those houses and the actual building, where the building footprint begins, is that enough room to allow sunlight to filter down into those backyards in the afternoons? Because the sun will be on the west, right? And these properties, because they are facing east, they won't have anything, they won't have sun in the morning in those backyards, really very much at all, because their house blocks it. And now in the afternoons, it's likely to be blocked by this tall building. I'm really concerned about that, because if you've been in those yards, there are a lot of pools, there are countless number of gardens. Those people tend to live in their backyards in the summer. So I'm just really kind of concerned how that is too. I mean, if you know, councilors can imagine your own backyard being impacted by that. I'm just wondering, has anybody taken a look at how the light in those yards will be affected? Because it is having an impact. And I'm not sure that there's a building height that would take it away. I really am not sure of that, but I do think it's important to those people to know that it has been looked at and considered strongly in this process. So I would ask that question first. I guess to Mr. Schultz, Steve?
Mr. Schultz? through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais. Unfortunately, we don't have the expertise on staff to be looking at that. So I do understand the concerns with the height of the building. And I know Mr. Fontaine is willing to work with the city to try to limit the impact as much as possible. I know there was the comment made by Mr. Fontaine that if the height is reduced, then the building would have to be enlarged, thus stretching further north on the property, which is also not ideal either. So I'll leave that with Mr. Fontaine if he has any comment to add on that. But yeah, unfortunately, we don't have the expertise on staff to be looking at shadows or lighting.
I would actually like to hear what Mr. Fontaine says and then come back to you for a minute, David, please.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Fontaine?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Council, and staff. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Desmarais and Council. The height of the building is important to us to make the building feasible. The 47 feet, I don't know that we've ever asked for 47. We think we can live with about a 37 foot high building. We need 20 feet clear inside the building. Then the above for slope, and we have to allow for heat, sprinkler system, and lighting. And ultimately we need 20 foot clear. We're willing to work to go lengthways. We do have quite a bit of property. So we put the initial design down on the sketch, but that is workable. We either go wider, longer, and things like that. So yes, we're very much willing to work with the neighbors and to try to appease everybody as best we can.
Well, thank you, and thank you, Mr. Fontaine. I think that you're making a great effort, and that's really important. And you know, the fact that you are only needing 36 or so feet for that building really brings it down to the recommendation of 11 meters. I believe, if maybe my math is wrong, but I think 11 meters is about 36 feet, is it not? So that would bring it right down to there, and we wouldn't have to be worrying about changing the guidelines. But in any case, there is that. To go back to David, though, I really wish that for future situations like this, we would find a way to reach out and get that kind of expertise, because it heavily impacts, and it could make the difference between letting something go forward and not doing that. So I think it's important that we try to find a way to do that. Okay, so the part about the height is really my main point here. Just would like to also, though, ask council to join me in providing staff direction to have site plan control, have the agreement come back to council for approval, and to have the residents notified when that site plan control is coming to council, so that they have knowledge of that. They would like to be there to make sure that everything is clean. I mean, this is, you know, it's impacting their properties, and I understand where this is coming from. But every person that I've heard from is not at all unhappy with their interactions with Mr. Fontaine. So that's a really good thing. That's a very good thing. And I was pleased to hear that. There is really a need, though, for people to be able to have some more input. So if the site plan control can come back to council and have the public notified, that would be perfect. That just solves the problem. I'd also like to take a minute to thank the people on Kalali East and Janet Street, the residents there who took the time today and over the weekend to reach out and make their feelings known, and they did that quite clearly. So it was a lively telephone day, but well worth it, because the complaints or concerns came really down to the height of the building. More than it did anything else. We were easily able to talk about dust and that sort of thing, but the height of the building is the sticking point. So I will just leave that with you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Schultz, with regards to it coming back to council and letting the neighborhood know, is that an issue?
To you, Mr. Mayor, through to Councillor Desmarais, no, that wouldn't be an issue at all. Council has that ability. They did delegate the authority to the Director of Planning for site plan approval, but you can gladly have that back for sure.
Okay.
I think that answers your question, Councillor.
It does. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to move that as an amendment. If Councillor Beauregard will second that, that we put that in, part of the main motion, but we'll take it as amendment right now, that come back to us and be circulated to the neighborhood. Any questions on the amendment? Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Typically, so one of the reasons I believe that this was a joint application with the city, and one of the reasons why the paper notice and hand delivery notice was out, because there's an issue here about time, and so with respect to the site plan agreement. So we're here this evening to talk about zoning. And so I'm wondering if the recommendation is to put site plan ahead of zoning or after the zoning is passed. If I could get some clarity on that.
No, I think the councillor means when the site plan comes forward that it come back to us, but that would become second. This comes first. Correct, councillor?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. Thank you.
And Councillor Demeray is nodding her head yes, so we're fine. Any further questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Raise your hand. Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so that'll be part of the main motion when it comes back. Councillor Demeray's done. Councillor Bruno to the main motion.
Yes, sir. Through you to David. David, one of the things, I mean, I think it was a great initiative, and I think that it shows foresight in having these parcels that are connected, the city and Mr. Fontaine's being put together. Councillor Demeray referenced the letter that we all got today. And so one of my concerns is, whilst I think it's a proper way to handle this large parcel of property and get it zoned in a fashion for which we would or wouldn't all agree to go forward with, my concern is on the city portion and the talk surrounding contamination, that because it's a joint application for all the land, that contaminants for which are not part of Mr. Fontaine's property, could that hold up this approval or upon appeal? I mean, I'm trying to get my brain around, somebody has a complaint about our contamination, and Mr. Fontaine's forced to be along for the ride.
Mr. Schultz?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Bruno. That shouldn't be a concern. I know there are studies, as CAO Louis was alluding to, that are being undertaken for that property. But the rezoning and redesignation from residential to industrial wouldn't typically trigger the need for any environmental studies or testing to be done. So with this change, it would actually be making the lands more suitable for the soil situation that is present.
Thank you. And kudos to you and everyone else who I know has worked hard to put together something that works for everyone. And I think, like Councillor Demeray said, there's been lots of progress and trying to work together on this. Appreciate your hard work, David, because this has come in a tight time frame, and you've been reacting in your department quite fast, as well as the others involved in this application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Beauregard?
My questions have been raised and already answered. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baggett.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions. One for the CAO. You mentioned we're doing a phase 2 environmental assessment of the city's property. What's the cost of that phase 2 environmental assessment to the city?
For your worship, to Councillor Agu, like I said, I actually permitted the public works staff to log off of the meeting, not knowing that question would come up here. and they have a figure. I'm searching through my email from them, but I don't see one handy. If it's okay with you, I'll report that number to council via email, and maybe we can read that number aloud at the next council meeting so that the public is informed of it as well. So I apologize, I don't have that this evening.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. My second, I guess, a question and a comment. The storage of material in the proposed warehouse, is there any regulation on what cannot be stored in there or what can be stored? Example, I'll give you an example. Flammable liquids. It's a very common storage stuff going on nowadays, and is that allowed in something that for over there with the warehouse?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bagu. That's not necessarily something that would be included in the zoning of the property. That would come up through the site plan process with the fire department. Depending on the types of materials being stored in the building would change the classification of the building, thus requiring different fire requirements and even explosive requirements. To my knowledge, I don't believe any of that will be happening on this property, at least from what I've heard from Mr. Fontaine. But typically that wouldn't be something that would be included in the zoning. We do have our overall prohibited uses would be, it's listed as a noxious use. So any hazardous use is automatically prohibited in Port Colborne unless authorized otherwise.
Councillor?
All right, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Go back to me, another thing I do have a result now.
See, I have some information.
Through your worship to Councillor Bagu, rather than wait until next meeting, I did have a staff member pass me that information via cell phone message here, so I apologize for using my phone during council, but it is a phase 2 ESA delineation study. It is has an upset limit of $40,000. That means it could be less, but it won't be more than $40,000. And to the best of my knowledge, it's being conducted in accordance with our purchasing policy by Halex Environmental. That's HALLEX.
Great, thank you. Okay, further questions then? Councilor Beauregard, your hand's back up. Is that from before or no?
No, I got a question.
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, through your worship to Mr. Schultz. So back to the height of the building that Councilor Desmarais discussed. So in the Appendix B, if 14.5 meters isn't required, and Mr. LaFontaine will actually be fine with going to 11, do we need to change that in the bylaw?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. If that is the council's wish, then yes, that would have to be changed in the bylaw. I'd have to go through the clerk to see if that can be changed as part of an amendment to the motion or something like that. I would defer that to the clerk.
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, if the height goes back to the original motion, the bylaw would need to be changed. It will be brought forward at the next meeting.
Okay, Councillor?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, seeing no further questions, we have a motion as amended. Sorry, Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm sorry. I thought that Councillor Beauregard was going to put forward an amendment or ask that item be amended, which I will do now, please.
And what's your motion?
I would like it actually to read the 11 meters as opposed to 14.5.
Okay. Seconder for that? Councillor Beauregard. Questions on that? Councillor Bruno?
Thank you, Worship. Through you, I'd like to ask Mr. Fontaine if he could qualify that number that his engineer says it needs to be the minimum of. I just tried to do a quick calculation. Angie was right on before. I want to make sure that we're not off by 5 inches or 9 inches, and you can't do your building and it doesn't fit the bylaw. So best to get it cleared up ahead of time if we could.
Okay, Mr. Fontaine?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. The height, we're not exactly sure because we've been adjusting the width and the length of the building. There are different designs. We have 2 contractors working with us. So we were hoping at site plan control, that's where we would decide on the best height, speaking with the neighbors, speaking with staff. If we limit the height now, then you do handcuff us somewhat on what we can do as far as length goes. It means then we'll go further north type thing. So it would be nice to have the height open right now and that we deal with it at site plan control and that all options are open. But at this point, if it gets restricted, it will limit on what flexibility we have with that building.
Thank you. Sorry, I thought you had a number. My calc was that that's sort of 35.75 feet. And so I didn't know if you were under 36 feet in that rough calc.
Mr. Fontaine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. The 2 contractors, one on the public meeting that we had, I asked for 41 feet. That was the first number we received from one of the contractors. Second contractor, not sure if it's a bargaining tactic, says he can do it with the less height restriction, but there are some things they can work with, putting heat towards the center of the building if it's a peaked roof and things like that. So again, I'm not exactly sure with what the height is. Both contractors are working on it right now with pricing and like I said, I'm not sure of that exact number there.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bruno. Councillor Beauregard.
Through your worship to Mr. Schultz, can we deal with that at site plan or must this be done in the bylaw?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. The height can be adjusted at the site plan stage, but it can't be any more than what is permitted in the bylaw that council approves tonight. So, for example, if council recommends approval of 11 meters, Mr. Fontaine wouldn't be able to exceed that at the site plan stage. He would have to keep it under that 11 meters.
Councillor Beauregard.
Okay, thank you. Actually, sorry, I got one other question. So thank you, Councilor Demeray, for making that a motion, because the reason why I didn't is it would have to come to the next meeting. Is that what Amber said, I believe?
Correct, Councillor.
Yeah, so there is some time limitations, right? We must make a decision on this within a certain time frame. When is that?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Beauregard. For official plan amendments, I believe the time frame is 120 days.
Okay.
And that's in conjunction with the zoning bylaw amendment as well. Because the city is the applicant, we are the only body that could appeal the application for non-decision. Because there's no real applicant, we wouldn't have that worry for making a non-decision.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Demeray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. All right, considering what I've just been hearing, what I'm understanding is if we pass this as it stands tonight, there would be the 14.5 meter maximum allowance. But at site plan control, we can certainly say you can't go over 40 feet or whatever. We can deal with it at that point, up to the maximum allowance, correct?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demeray. If the proposal that comes forward at site plan is under the requirement in the bylaw, then there wouldn't be anything that staff have control to limit that.
Okay, so this really does limit, it puts the residents at a disadvantage because they're pushing it in this sense. It really does, and I'm really uncomfortable with it. I'm going to go ahead with asking for this to be amended and come back at the next meeting, and it'll decide a vote of council as to which way that goes.
Okay, any further questions on this? This is the amendment only. Councillor Bruno.
Thank you, Worship. Just a point of clarification. I hear 11 meters, and then I hear 14.5 or another higher number. Can you clarify that, Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. The 14.5 number is the number that was provided by Mr. Fontaine for his proposal. The 11 meters is often misinterpreted now because our bylaw was actually recently amended to 15 meters. However, our bylaw does limit the height when abutting a residential zone, which this property is, to 8 meters for the property. 11 meters is our general height limit across the board for a lot of different types of zones, residential. That's our main one, I guess, residential would be. For the most part, the 14.5 meters is from Mr. Fontaine, and the 11 meters was what the zoning used to be before Councillor bumped that up to 15 meters for a zone not abutting a residential zone.
Not abutting.
Councillor Bruno?
To the last point Councillor Demery brought up, can we, is it easier to pass this with the condition? Well, I guess we don't even have to put the condition in that it is 11 meters. If we find out that Mr. Fontaine needs more than 11 meters, he would have to come back anyways. Whereas if it's passed at 11 meters and he is under 11 meters, he gets to move forward. The file gets to move forward, I should say. Yeah. That be correct?
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. Yes, if the height is under what is passed by council in the bylaw, then Mr. Fontaine would be able to move forward. If he, for whatever reason, requires a height larger than what is passed by the bylaw, Mr. Fontaine would require a minor variance application or subsequent zoning bylaw amendment to allow for an increased height.
Okay.
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if he finds out tomorrow that he needs 12 meters and nothing but that, does he? If he has to do an amendment, does that elongate this process, or can he come back in 2 weeks because it's that tight, because it's that close to him finding out? I mean, it would be a shame for him to have to wait 2 months or 3 months if we, because we may ultimately say, yeah, 11 and a half still works for us. I don't know. But I'm just concerned about trying to protect the spirit of what Councillor Demery has to say, and yet keep the process moving. And so I guess I would like the best of both worlds. So if it had to come back because he needed 12 or 11.5, that can't be before us in 2 weeks.
Mr. Schultz?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno. If council passes the bylaw, then no, it would have to come back at a completely new application.
Wow.
If the bylaw is, if the decision is delayed further, then that's possibly something that could be worked in. But for the most part, a new application would be required, or a minor variance application.
Councillor?
This may be abnormal, but I'd like to ask the developer his opinion of this, because obviously we could go either way, but one's going to take more time than the other. Does that become the main issue? Because I think that ultimately we wanted to protect the residents as well.
Mr. Fontaine?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno and Council. I get it. I understand the concerns for the height. I really do. And I can understand if we leave an open end here right now, that could I come in and then make my height 14 meters because that's what you've allowed. My first understanding of Mr. Schultz was that the site plan would be able to control that, but I guess I misunderstood. But that would be the ideal. Time is of the essence. And I know Councillor Kalaliff, last meeting you referred to this kind of happening quick. It's not happening quick for me. This has been going on prior to COVID for me. It's funny how we're referring things to prior to COVID now and post-COVID, but I've gone through 2 planners. I've gone through 2 economic development officers. I've been in a lot of discussions with staff, and it's not the ideal thing, but it does fit. As far as industrial activity in a neighborhood, it doesn't get much better than this as far as not as harmful, or lack of a better word. It's a warehouse, and yes, there will be some trucking, but it is not that invasive, I guess is the word I'm looking for on it. So any further delays does hurt. If 14 meter is too high, I will ensure that it's not that high, and we'll just go a little bit longer, and we'll have to redesign. But any further holdup does hurt. And as Councillor Danch may know, the building costs have gone up significantly in the last little while, which is also a big issue. And we're told a week delay here is a couple months delay in ordering the building materials. There's that much of a supply thing. I'm not sure if I answered the question there, but I would like to see this proceed if possible.
Councillor Bruno.
Nope, that's fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kalaliff, is your hand up for a question?
Just a quick question through you, Mr. Mayor, to David. You talk about industry next to residential as being only 8 meters. Can you refresh for me why we're looking at 11 instead of the 8? Why is that different now?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Kalaliff. There's a bit of confusion with the permitted heights as is in the light industrial zone. So for a property that is abutting a residential zone, the height limit is 8 meters as per the zoning. For a property that is not abutting a residential zone, it used to be 11 meters prior to council amending that back in November of 2020. And that at that time, it was bumped up from 11 meters to 15 meters that is permitted for when it's not abutting a residential zone. However, in this case, this property is abutting a residential zone, which puts it at the 8 meter requirements unless council approves an increase to that.
So we're excuse me, we were not even talking 8 meters. We're going from 8 meters basically up to 14 or 15. We're not going, we're talking 11 meters, but technically we're going from 8 to 14 because 8 is what it should be, right?
Mr. Schultz.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Danch.
Thank you for that. Larry, I mean, obviously this is all about the height. Can you put up this building and I still use feet at 32, 33 feet high on that, satisfy your needs and keep the neighborhood happy over there? And I mean, 32, 33 feet, 42 feet, that's a huge increase. But I mean, if you can make that building work at that height of the 11 meters and stuff like that, that works for you. I think we can save a lot of time here and move forward, and you can get your project going. You are correct on material cost because this is like nothing I've ever seen in my life. But if you can make the 11 meters work and make it a little bit longer, I think we all should get together and let the man get going with his project. Obviously, you've been a couple years at this, right?
Mr. Fontaine.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Danch. Yes, I have been going through this for a while, and yes, we'll do what it takes. If we have to make the 11 meters work, again, it will lengthen the building there, but I really don't see that much more of an intrusion, just maybe a couple of the homes will have a building to their backyard, but we'll make it work on it there. anything less, and going to feet, I think we're getting into the 33, 34 foot mark with the 11 meters. And we'll have to do some creative designing on the inside somewhat to be efficient still. But yes, I would like to make that work.
11 meters gives you 36.3 feet.
And I believe it's workable, and it just means a little bit longer. We do have quite a bit of land, so a little bit add on to the building, but that should make it work.
Eleven and a half gives you 38 feet. Just for council's information.
I'm sorry.
Councilor Bruno?
Thank you. Mayor, I agree with Councilor Danch. I'd like to move forward on this. Does that mean we, either Councilor Desmarais would have to withdraw her motion, or we would have to defeat it so it would stay at 11 feet and could be, or 11 meters, and it could be decided tonight?
That's correct. Councilor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, the problem is that it's not reading at 11 meters. The problem is that this bylaw is reading at 14.5 meters, and and no one has actually seen what the impact of that really is going to be. That's the one problem. The other problem is that we're looking at this 11 meters that David is telling us doesn't really apply anymore, but that's that other number that is floating around out there. But when we really get down to it, it should have been 8 meters. So, how much do you want these residences to be impacted by? It's time to take a look at this, and Mr. Fontaine is right. He says he's willing to work with people, and I believe that he is. I think that we have to find a way to get this bylaw to state what really is going to be. If we want to settle at 11 meters, I'm sure that the community, although they might not love it, that's the number that they've been hearing. That may be a little bit better to deal. That does give you just slightly over 36 feet. If the building is a little longer, I think that could probably be dealt with. I'd be okay with that, but still it requires changing the bylaw that's in front of us, because that bylaw reads 14.5. How do we make sure that we're sitting there at the 14.5? Because if we pass this, council has no means to go forward and restrict it in the future. That's the problem. Even through site plan control, we won't be able to restrict it in the future. So how do we do it tonight without costing Mr. Fontaine more time? I am sensitive to that. I do want to see this go forward. So how do we do that? That's what I'm asking.
Good. Mr. Schultz, one question. The current zoning, what is the maximum height on the current zoning of that property?
Could
somebody put an apartment building up there today?
For the residential development building, no, well, it would be 11 meters would be the permitted height.
Okay, so
residential.
So currently it's 11 meters.
11 meters, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Just for council's information, I have Councilor Beauregard and Councilor Bruno.
Through your worship, I just want to say that I agree with Councilor Desmarais' remarks. I believe really that this is the 11 meters is quite the compromise, especially when it should have been 8, and the bylaw now reads 14.5. Going to 11 is really, in my opinion, would be a compromise. So that's all. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Bruno.
Yes, I've been supportive of 11 meters. My understanding of Councilor Desmarais' amendment was to push it forward 2 weeks to get that sorted out. And what I'm suggesting is that 11 is something that I could live with. It sounds like Mr. Fontaine could live with. And so hence the reason I thought we had to, and I thought your advice was that we had to defeat or have Councilor Desmarais' motion rescinded. So is that still correct?
Madam Clerk?
Through the chair, currently there is an amendment on the floor for Councilor Desmarais to put it to the height to 11 meters. If that is passed and then the full motion is passed, the bylaw will come forward at the next meeting for approval.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions? So this is on the amendment only, reducing it from 14.5 to 11 meters. No further questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So it's the motion as amended. Any further questions? So passing this, only the bylaw will come back in 2 weeks. Okay, seeing no further questions, all in favor, please raise your hand. In favor, please raise your hand. No, in favor, everybody put their hand up, I can. Opposed? It's carried. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fontaine. It's great, thank you. Next is Chief Administrative Office recommendation for report 2021-108 be received. The council direct the manager of strategic initiatives to stop the Port Colborne Innovation Creative and Culinary Incubator. The council appoint a member of the Friends of Roseland Center to the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum Board, and that the director curator of the Port Colborne Historical and Marine Museum be responsible for the general management of Roseland Center. I have movers Councillor Wells and Councillor Beauregard on that. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a comment in regards to that. First of all, I'm in favor of this. I just wanted to make sure that it was pulled for tonight, just to make sure everybody was aware in the public domain that we are not going forward with the Innovation Culinary Center at the Roselawn. I know that was of some questions, and I just wanted to make sure that it was widely known that we are not going to go forward with that. So that was the comment, and that's why I wanted to have this pulled.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wagner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Long, I guess, is leading us. And while I'm excited that the museum will have a shot at putting its stamp on Roselawn, I'm disappointed that I didn't see anything in there where this will come back for a review or a look-see at how it's going in a certain amount of time. Did I miss that someplace, or is that not in there?
Mr. Long?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Bodner. I know the report mentions that we will be coming back later this summer with part two, and part two will include some recommendations for other future redevelopment and renewal plans for Roselawn. Will this summer be too soon to assess the proposed sort of governance and management model that we are proposing tonight? It may be too soon, but I think certainly between myself and Stephanie and Greg, we could provide an update to council at that time in terms of sort of the first, what would that be, the first 3 or 4 months of this new governance and management. Hope that helps.
Thank you. I agree. This summer is going to be weird. It's not going to be a regular year, I don't think. I think we're not past our grief yet with COVID. But I would like to see something in there that, whether I'm sitting at this table or not, whether it's 2 years out, that, if the public for some reason isn't happy with where we're going with this, or there's a few tweaks that could be made, I think someone should have a shot at saying, hold it, 90% of this is great, but 10% isn't. And who gets to have a shot at that time? That's just what I was looking for. At some time in the near future, not this summer, because I don't think that's fair to anybody to do that. But I think it would be good to have council of the day take a look at this and say, hey, this is where we want to go. This is working great. Or, some other option. So.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions? No further questions? Councilor Bonner, go ahead.
So because nobody else is saying anything, do I put what I think is a time limit in there? Do I say, I would say by the end of next summer, like in the fall, after they've gone through hopefully a summer of no discontent, and they have a chance to implement a few things. But I just want to throw that out there where a council gets a look at this and says, God bless you, this is great, let's keep going, or we need to take another look at this.
You want to put a date of October 2022?
I do. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Long, can we use that as one of the meetings in October of 2022?
Confirmed, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to do an amendment? Or do you want a friendly amendment? Okay. You still have to do the business of the city. I understand it is election, but there's business of the city must move on. So I'm going to have Councilor Bonner move that amendment that it comes back with a report from staff in October of 2022. Can I get a seconder to that? Councilor Wells, questions on the amendment? Seeing none, all in favor? Raise your hands. Opposed? That's carried. Further questions to the motion as amended? Councilor Bonner?
No.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. Item 7.9 is Chief Administrative Office Report 2021-123 be received for information purposes. This is the status update for Niagara South Coast Tourism Association. Mr. Long and Mr. Higginbotham, you're going to take this to start? Or do you just want to go to questions?
We can go right to questions, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Questions I have, Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Wells, Councillor Kalaleff will move that. Sorry, Councillor Wells, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Manager Long. This, in my calculation, represents about a total of $74,000 for the city to put toward this, and that's not a little chunk of change. So I would really support this initiative. When do you think the strategic initiatives and more detail will be available so that we can take a look at it and really sink our teeth into it?
Who wants to take that, Mr. Long or Mr. Higginbotham? Right?
Yes, through your worship to Councillor Wells. Just to clarify, are you looking for more details on how the Port Colborne's portion of the funds was spent? Because we have that information available immediately.
Councillor Wells?
Not so much on, well, that would be nice to see, but I'm not concerned about too much on how it was spent. But it makes reference to strategic initiatives in your report, and it doesn't identify those strategic initiatives. So I was just wondering when those strategic initiatives may be released, and what details there might be involved with those or related to those.
To clarify through your worship to Councillor Wells, the strategic initiatives identified in the report are actually in the form of a bulleted list that you see in the report. Those are the breakdown of how almost $100,000 was spent after distribution to each of the 4 municipalities within the South Coast organization. So the list of initiatives is there, and they're underway and at various degrees of completion.
So these are the redevelop the website, introduce a new logo, publicize promotional video, complete Google
Correct.
My Business, all those.
Correct. Those are the strategic initiatives that the South Coast has underway.
Okay, Councillor Wells.
Okay, and again, I mean, those are just bullet points. I was just, if there's going to be anything more, I was just wondering when that might come out. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited that South Coast has another shot at success here. We've been limping along with some sporadic success, but with Greg on board and Gary's help and the whole senior staff, and them working with the other municipalities, I think we've got another shot at making this work. And as you can see, there is money available, and I really believe very shortly, and even now, the government is going to be throwing money at tourism opportunities because it's really needed by the industries out there. And I'm really optimistic for the first time in a number of years that we can capture some significant dollars, more than we have in this initiative. And it's just good if I just believe in that team that's there working on this, and I think it's really going to show some success. That's all I got to say. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Councillor. I don't see any further questions. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Item 8.1 is under correspondence items. It's from the town of Fort Erie regarding province investigating and updating the source water protection legislation. This is brought forward by Councillor Wells, Councillor Desmarais, so I'll have them move it. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to bring everybody's attention to, if they hadn't had a chance to read it, is the Fort Erie Report PDS 23-2021. Very excellent report, very well written and put together, and it really outlines the importance and the need to protect the aquifer in our drinking water. So again, it's just a good thing to take a look at for interest to understand how we need to protect our water, our aquifer.
Great, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Desmarais.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would repeat all of what Councillor Wells had to say, and I know that Councillor Bodnar has been on this as well going forward. I would just like to see us not just receive it for information, but give it our full support. So I'd like to take it beyond the information and support it.
Yep, that's no problem. Actually, I was going to state that when we call the vote, so I'm glad you said that. Thank you. So any further questions on the on this motion from the town of Fort Erie? So this is to support, not just receive, council. Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, councillors. This is from the town of Pelham, and it's their motion to request the region of Niagara delay the official plan update. That's moved by Councillor Wells. I'll take Councillor Bruno as a seconder. Councillor Wells.
Thank you, Your Worship. When I read this, I saw that there was a good opportunity for us to lend our staff a little bit of leeway in regards to being able to bring our official plan and our zoning bylaws all up to conformity with the regional's new official plan. So I would strongly suggest that we support Pelham's resolution in whichever way we can in order to give our staff the opportunity and to have more time in order to bring our house in order.
Great, thank you. Any further questions? I am meeting tomorrow with senior staff with regards to the initial draft that the region's put out. Just to go over that, I will be attending the planning meeting on Wednesday afternoon. There is some concerns that came out of our workshop last week from many of the communities with regards to the mapping and regional staff's reluctance to really actually give us that mapping. And I think it's very important that if they're going to make changes within our city, which I'm still of the opinion that we should be the author of our plan, and that we shouldn't be, our hands shouldn't be tied by the region, quite frankly. But we want to actually make sure that that mapping comes out before this is passed, so that we have an idea of what they're talking about. I think mapping is very important. We all know what happened a number of years back when they broad brushed the city of Colborne. They took land that they put under their green brush, and you couldn't grow rocks there. So it is important. That was another issue that came up with a number of the municipalities with regards to what's happened in the past. So we just, if it's going to be done, let's do it right the first time, and not stifle any development within municipalities where development should take place. We all know that there's a number of areas that are already protected. There's nothing wrong with the protection that that comes forward either through the MPCA or the regional councillors themselves to staff. But we just want to make sure we know exactly what it is. So I'm glad you brought that up, Councillor, so that we can make sure that we have our thoughts known when this final draft comes up. So thank you. Any further questions to that? Seeing none, moved and seconded. I had Councillor Bruno as a seconder. All those in favor? That's carried. Next is item 8.3, Township of West Lincoln. Request for support to amend the Beds of Navigable Waters Act. Moved by Councillor Wells, seconded by Councillor Bagu. Councillor Wells.
Thank you again, Your Worship. My understanding and through my research is that this pertains to separation or severances of lands that does not follow a normal process. Under the Beds of Navigable Waters, the actual bed of that navigable waterway is not transferred to the owner. It's held in as a crown property, if you will. In that being said, there is no definition as to what is navigable waters. So for example, just for an example, living close to the Wignell Drain, I could throw my canoe into the Wignell Drain, paddle down to the lake, go for a swim in the lake, paddle back up the Wignell Drain, and say, hey, I can claim that that Wignell Drain is now a navigable water because I'm using it as a means of transport, a transport way from my place down to the lake. What that now allows valet to do is to utilize that as a severance on the property that they own between the east and west side of the Wignell Drain, and they can then turn around and sever that property, and we as a community have no say in it. So I think in order to get ahead of it, it would be wise for us to support the resolution from West Lincoln in regards to getting this clarified and getting definition and getting the act changed so that it's in our best interest.
Correct. Because I don't want to see drains put in as navigable like rivers and canals and lakes. Like it's that's not what they're designed for. They were man-made. They weren't natural. So I agree with you, Councillor Wells. We got to be careful on this. So I do agree with this one. Any further questions on this? That we support West Lincoln? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you, Council. Next is item 8.7. This is from the NPCA. It's a resolution, whereas the public has shown a strong desire and need to be out in nature in the NPCA watershed and across Ontario. It has been demonstrated that being in nature benefits our physical and mental health. The provincial and the regional of Niagara have identified that the population of Niagara is expected to grow by 226,000 or 50% by 2051. The popularity of the present community connecting trails like the Friendship Trail, Niagara Riverfront Trail, Seaway Canal Trail, DeFasco Trail, and the Gord Harry Trail is well documented. There are a large number of unopened road allowances and abandoned rail lines and other possible corridors that are presently not accessible to the public that have the capability of making physical connections between the municipalities in Niagara and with the Hamilton and Halton County. Conservation authorities, including the MPCA, have been shown to be agencies that can plan for and develop trails throughout their watersheds. Now therefore be it resolved that the MPCA, being the agency with 2,845 hectares of public land connecting Niagara, Hamilton, and Haldimand, convene a forum to bring agencies and municipalities in its watershed together to facilitate planning and development of an interjurisdictional trails network connecting municipalities, neighborhood employment areas, and nature destinations, and that the MPCA municipalities be encouraged to adopt, through official plan updates, expanded trail networks using publicly owned corridors, abandoned rail lines, and other opportunities. MPCA staff explore formal partnership opportunities with municipalities to map, build, and enhance trail connections, and further that a copy of this motion be circulated to the local regional municipalities within the MPCA's jurisdiction. That was carried by the MPCA. I have Councillors Bagu and Desmarais bringing this forward. Councillor Bagu.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm really glad that you read the whole thing, because I would like to make a motion that our council support this.
Perfect.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Clayliff, you'll second that? Any questions, Councillor Clayliff? No? Okay. Any questions, Councillor Bagu? No?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Councillor Desmarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to add one thing. That's exactly why I wanted to lift it as well, was to make sure that we support it. Our trails are vitally important, but I would really recommend that we participate with great enthusiasm, not just approve it, but get involved as far as we possibly can, because it's gonna make a huge difference in our city going forward.
Okay, thank you. Is that your hand up, Councillor Bruno?
Yes, sir. I just wanted to add, if this goes out to 2051, if they want municipal participation, that we nominate Councillor Beauregard, who will likely be around then to represent our interests.
We could do that.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, it was 9:45. I thought we needed some humor right now.
Thank you, Councillor. There is a number of staff that are listening specifically in strategic projects. I think they get the message, Councillor Desmarais, that we look at this and see how we can further partner with the NPCA. I know our CAO is doing that right now with the billion tree program that the NPCA approached me on, and I asked Scott if he'd take the bull by the horns, and he's done that very well. So any further questions on this? All in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Thank you, Council. Which leads me into 8.8 for Councillor Bagu and Desmarais. It's the resolution from the MPCA with regards to 2 billion trees initiative. I think everybody has read this. We'll ask the CEO to give us an update, but I'll have Councillors Bagu and Desmarais move this. I assume those councillors want it so that we support this, correct, Council? Okay.
Absolutely.
Did you have any questions, or do you want me to go to the CAO?
Cool.
Okay, so just to give you a quick synopsis of this, I was approached by our CAO, Chandra Sharma, with regards to this, and if Porkover could help lead the charge with regards to the other municipalities. Mr. Louis and I had a great discussion on this. Then we talked to the CAO of the MPCA, and I'll let Mr. Louis take it from there. Mr. Louis.
Sure, through your worship to council, just like the mayor described, he sort of tasked me with bringing the rest of the CAOs in Niagara together. I guess I liked it when I was a younger CIO, but now I guess I'm an elder statesman, and they all listen to me. So we had a great meeting a few weeks ago on Zoom where every single municipality lower tier in Niagara was represented by their CAO. One was an alternate. Nobody declined the invitation. There was around the table unanimous support for this. The NPCA is going to lead the charge by applying for grant funding under the 2 billion trees program. They want to plant 1 million trees. So my notes aren't right in front of me. 1 million trees in Niagara in just a few years. And to put that in perspective, from 2001 to 2016, they planted 1 million trees. So that's about 15 years worth of trees in the next 2 years or so. on Conservation Authority property and municipal property. So we need some planning on our part, because you can't just throw a tree everywhere, but trails, parks, municipal facilities, really anywhere that we have some space, we would like to participate along with our neighbors in Niagara. But first step is to lend our support behind the application, hoping that 12 municipalities and the region are doing that in the next few days or in the next council meeting, so that our the Conservation Authority submission is received at the federal level before the deadline, and then we'll get about the task of actually following through and getting those trees in the ground.
Great, thank you, Mr. Louie, thank you for taking that task on. Any further questions to the CAO in regards to this? Seeing none, all in favor for support, please raise your hand. Great, thank you, council. That's passed unanimously. There are no motions this evening. Are there any notices of motion? Okay, thank you. We have two sets of minutes for minutes of boards and committees. We have the Canal Days Advisory Committee minutes of March the 2nd, 2021, and the Colborne Public Library Board meeting minutes of April 6, 2021. Can I have Councillors Bagu and Beauregard move those? Any questions to either of those minutes? And all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. The following bylaws will be read out by number. Bylaws 19.1, 19.2, 19.5, 19.6, 19.7, 19.8, 19.9, and 19.3 and 4 will be moved till our next meeting. I'll have Councillors Danch and Demaray move that. Are there any questions to any of the bylaws that I read out? Seeing none, all in favor, please raise your hand. That's carried. Next, the confidential items. We are going to go in camera. I have moved by Councillors Demaray and Councillor Beauregard. The council do now proceed into closed session in order to address the following matters. 20.1, minutes of the closed session portion of the April 26, 2021 council meeting. And item 20.2, Corporate Services Department Report 2021-143 concerning the performance review and goals of the CAO pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001, subsections 239(2)(b. Personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local employees. Any questions? All in favor? That's carried. We'll now break for that. Council, you can leave and then zoom in for the in-camera meeting. And for those that are watching at home, we thank you for watching this evening. And remember, any issues you have, please do not hesitate to call our CSR department. They're great people down there, and they'll direct you if they can't fix it for you right there and then. They'll direct you to the proper person to see. Again, thank you. Please stay home and stay safe.